That whole nuclear plan, I mean, it sounds great. It's a bit late in the day.
I just think what people want them to do, actually, is increase spending on conventional defence spending. We've got the smallest army since the Crimean War. 75,000. And we've got the biggest conflict in Europe since the Second World War.
Let us know your thoughts this morning. GBviews at gbnews.com. We have got a packed show between now and midday. First, though, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says the government will stop at nothing to protect Britons from cyber attacks ahead of the expected announcement of fresh sanctions against China. The government is set to sanction individuals believed to be involved in recent cyber attacks, which saw hackers access millions of voters' personal details. Several MPs and peers who've been critical of Beijing are thought to have also been targeted. It comes after a report found Britain is unprepared for a large-scale ransomware attack, due to, quote, a lack of investment. A £200 million package of investment aimed at securing the future of the country's nuclear industry will be unveiled today. Rishi Sunak will declare a critical national endeavour as he vows to strengthen the nuclear industry and boost jobs. He'll introduce a new fund backed by £20 million a year in public money for the next decade to support growth in Barrow-in-Furness, the home of Britain's submarine programmes. The government says the money will provide grants to local organisations and improvements to transport and health projects. The Labour leader's promising to take back control of our national energy security as he pledges investment for homegrown power generation. Sir Keir Starmer's pledging an £8.3 billion boost as part of efforts to get President Putin's boot off our throat. It'll create thousands of jobs and cut bills for families. Thousands of junior doctors in Wales are striking for 96 hours. It's the third time they've held strikes this year in their ongoing pay dispute. The industrial action will see appointments at hospitals and GPs postponed across the country. And more than 14 million Easter getaway trips are expected over the weekend, causing travel disruption for many across the country. The RAC is warning that journeys on popular routes could take twice as long as usual, as the bank holiday weekend leads into a 2-week school holiday. Trains will also be stopped as Network Rail carries out engineering works on the West Coast main line between Good Friday and Easter Monday. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning, 9:34. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, senior government figures, according to the front page of the Telegraph today, fear Russia, China and Iran has been fueling some of these online conspiracy theories and wild rumours about the Princess of Wales' health, which was to try to destabilise the country, rather successfully.
It worked. This follows a difficult couple of weeks for the royals, from speculation around photoshopped royal family portraits to Kate announcing, sadly, that she's got cancer. Do we owe them an apology? Do all of us owe them an apology? Joining us now in the studio is columnist and for the Daily Mail, Sarah Vine. And you said exactly this, didn't you? Morning, Sarah.
Yeah, I think to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, not everybody, obviously, but I think that it's interesting what you say about this these Russian trolls and Chinese trolls. I think we all allowed ourselves to get a bit destabilised by it. I mean, let's be honest, we did. We all got a bit carried away, didn't we? And I've been thinking a lot about this over the weekend, and just thinking, the internet really does get under your skin sometimes, you know, and it's really hard to sort of separate the wood from the trees. And I think that, I mean, the thing that we did all get carried away about, I think, was the picture, the sort of doctored picture. And I think we sort of read into it all sorts of stuff that perhaps wasn't there. I think, you know, what the Princess of Wales has done, which was to do her own video in her own words, was the only thing she could do. She has to reclaim her own narrative. But even now, she's managed to do that.
But they're still trolling her.
Of course, I mean, they are still trolling. I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, there's this bloke who was in the Duke and Duchesses of Sussex documentary who's saying that, you know, it's all AI and stuff like that. I mean, there are still people doing that. But I think in Britain, I think that the sort of responsible media have now understood that, you know, we need to sort of...
I think there's a difference... It's so interesting when you say trolling her. I think I see a difference between people who are going on there and saying horrible things about this young mother with 3 children who's got the weight of the world on her shoulders, saying horrible things to her. But there's a different side of the analysis online for me, which are those people who are saying this footage can't be true, this isn't real. And what that says to me is that the trust has gone. And the fact that people can't tell the difference between an AI image
that was the problem.
and a real image is a bit scary.
Yes, I completely agree. But that was the problem with that Mother's Day photograph, which was that it was sort of, because it had been doctored, everyone, it sort of fueled all of those silly rumours. And actually, it turned out it was just a sort of innocent, oh, you know, I'm just going to move that.
She just thought William didn't do a very good photograph.
Exactly. Well, a typical husband.
I'm the photographer.
I mean, has any husband ever taken a good photograph of their wife? I mean, let's be honest. But so it spiralled. But it is about... I think this is a really interesting story about how the internet has just really got under all our skins, and we just need to take one step back. I mean, you know, you've got to understand that you know, there is absolutely no regulation out there, and you know, we're regulated. All of us are heavily regulated. You know, GBNews regulated, the Daily Mail regulated. So we
Facebook not regulated.
No, Twitter not regulated. TikTok completely off the scale.
But it is regulated to some extent. There are, of course, rules about what you can and can't say in hate speech or inciting violence.
But none of this is hate speech. This is just random speculation.
But what does that look like? Like, what do you want that regulation of the internet to look like? Because there's no such thing as the internet. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Rumble, there's Telegram.
Well, I mean, one of the main problems with the social media sites is that they have always rejected the notion that they are in any shape or form publishers.
Publisher, yeah, that's right.
They say we are platforms. We are platform for individual expression, freedom of expression. So they use the freedom of speech laws really to take the mickey out of everybody else. So they really have toxified.
But when you say everybody else, you mean kind of mainstream establishment media?
Well, actually, I mean mainstream establishment. I mean anyone who basically has if GBNews has a platform, the BBC has a platform, you know, the Daily Mail has a platform, the Telegraph has a platform. If you have a platform, you have a responsibility, not to take the mickey and not to just make things up as you go along, which is what people are doing.
Yeah, but my worry, and we talk about it regularly on this show, is that my worry is with more censorship, which, as we know now, is being encouraged by China, by Russia, that they deliberately want the West to have similar restrictions.
But they're the ones who
have. I don't think we want that.
But But the thing is, they are the ones who are taking advantage of the lack of regulation on the internet, as we've seen with the story today in the Telegraph, which is that there are all these Russian troll factories. They you know, yes, they have censorship, but it's really just a facade.
In China? Well, I mean, the fact that someone like an app like TikTok isn't allowed for children in China, like they have extreme censorship, and I don't think we want to live in a world. No,
but what's interesting is that they don't let their children see that app. I remember years and years ago, having a conversation with an executive at Google, and she said to me, none of the top brass at Google will let their children. They will let them have the internet in their house.
And isn't that?
And so what's that?
But it's okay for everybody else's kids.
Exactly. It's okay for everyone else's kids to watch porn and to have their brains filled with absolute nonsense, but not ours.
But that's children.
But I was talking about this the other day.
But that's China. So China produces this TikTok app, which corrupts everybody, but, oh, no, we can't have it in our country.
But that's for children, though. That's my point. I mean, but we aren't children. We are adults, and I don't like infantilising adults to tell us what we can and can't look at.
But I can remember, I was talking about this last week, writing a story about David Cameron having a big seminar with Google and all the websites, and there was going to be you had to watch porn, access porn, you had to opt in.
Yeah.
And it never happened.
Yeah.
So, because people would be embarrassed to opt in to have porn, so it would have restricted. Kids can now look at porn on their phones.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's outrageous.
Yeah. And I remember him also having a big discussion with Google about some searches not returning a Google search. So, you know, like really horrible searches, like if you were looking for child porn or something horrible. You know, Google agreed to sort of not return a search for that.
Yeah.
And so there were early attempts to try and contain it. but they've never really gone anywhere.
My worry is, whilst we're all, as you say, we all suddenly lose our minds over this story and we call for these voices to be shut down, we might regret that when you might have a government in power that you don't agree with. When Keir Starmer's there and he doesn't, he doesn't want the Daily Mail and right-wing commentators. This could end up being hoisted by your own party.
Because don't make the best the enemy of the good is what I would say. I mean, there's never been a problem with that sort of thing in Britain before with the press. The press has always been very free and very, very full-throated. There's never been that kind of censorship. No. I don't think censoring the internet to some, or just introducing some basic parameters, or just some guidelines that people have to adhere to, would lead to that.
What about the royal family? They are we're not going to see her, the star of the show, for a very long time. I suspect. Yeah. The king is struggling with his own recovery from cancer, or his treatment from cancer. Harry and Meghan?
Well, they seem to be sort of ignoring the whole thing completely, don't they? They
sent a private message, apparently.
Yes, yeah, that's it. I mean, they really do need to apologise. Can I just say that? I mean, because
stress is a major factor in cancer.
I mean, they have said much worse things about the King and Princess of Wales than I think anyone in the mainstream media has said, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, I think, do you know what occurred to me with this story as well? Because was the fact that when she sat there talking, Princess of Wales, and I very much felt like when she said, I didn't want to say anything because of the children. And I can completely relate to that, because it's about the time, particularly with younger children, it's about the timing of when you tell things.
I think so.
When I was separated from my husband, I deliberately chose almost the eve of them breaking up from school for Christmas. Because I knew they would need to have me close, be at home with me, be at home with my mum. It's the same as I think her mother's remarkable, actually.
She's never very far away. Never very far away.
Massively hands-on. I know through people who know them at school that the grandma's always there on the touchline at the sports event. She gets them on and off the school bus. Like, she's very hands-on. And that really moved me, actually, when she said, I wanted to tell the children in my own time. There's 3 young children. When they broke up from school, she didn't want to have to be pushed into it, because then she's got them off for Easter for 2 or 3 weeks and she can talk to them and keep them close.
I mean, they are quite lucky in that the children are still quite young.
Yeah.
I mean, my children often find things out about their father long before they're told. Do you know what I mean? It's funny. It's funny the way
they find
it
out
works,
on the internet,
because they find out on the internet.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, no comparison, much smaller thing. But I just think, I get that. It's very important to try and manage the children. But everything else, because it's just really frightening knowing that your mother's ill, and they will be probably very disturbed.
And I have a lot of questions.
And also, kids on the playground are cruel.
Yes, absolutely. Horrible.
And much better that they're not exposed to the kids on the playground just yet.
I mean, do you know, can I just tell you a quick story, which is that for quite a long time, my daughter genuinely believed that my husband was a lizard because somebody in the school playground had said to her, do you know that the whole of the British government are all lizards? And she used to come, she told me this recently, she said she used to come down in the middle of the night and just check to see that we hadn't turned into lizards.
What?
No,
Doctor Who?
Well, you know what little children are like.
They,
and someone in the playground had said, your dad and your mum, they're both lizards.
Gosh.
And she said to me the other day, we were having a conversation about it, she said, me and your brother, me and my brother used to talk about this. We used to have conversations. What are we going to do if our parents are actually lizards? So, children are very...
suggestible.
They are, of course they are.
Right, thank you, Sarah. Let us know your thoughts this morning, GBviews at gbnews.com. Do you think everybody just handled this badly? I think we handled it all right. We weren't too prurient, were we?
Well,
I think we've been
right.
empathetic.
I think so. Yeah. Now, coming up next, senior politicians have been summoned. There's going to be a briefing today with the Director of Security after a Chinese cyber attack, which was designed to get details about all of us voting in the last general election. 40 million of us, they got all our details. I sort of guess they got that anyway, really.
I don't see how that... I don't see how that affects our democracy. That's my issue, and that's how it's being sold to us. But we're going to
talk to Tory MP about that. You're with Britain's Newsroom at GBNews.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they commit a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use
if you
commit, there's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it seems China hasn't only been out to get our royal family. They've been targeting senior British politicians as part of a cyber-backed attack, which has spurred a crisis meeting in Westminster today.
That's right. 3 MPs and 1 peer, all harsh critics of Beijing, have been summoned to an urgent briefing by Parliament's Director of Security, whilst Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden is expected to address Parliament later today.
Well, let's bring in Tobias Ellwood, the Tory MP, who's the former chairman of the Defence Select Committee. Tobias, good morning to you. Can you explain if the Chinese, as we understand on our front pages, access personal details of 40 million British voters, how does that impact our democracy? Because I just rather assumed they know all about us anyway.
Well, that is perhaps, if dare say, a flippant comment to make about China, who's actually harvesting data to understand who we are, what our views are, and try and nudge our nation to have debates and to have disagreements, to sow political discord. That's what their operations are all about. It's now common modus operandi for countries, not just China, but Russia, Iran, and so forth, that spend an awful lot of money trying to distract governments such as the UK, who are critical of those countries. And that's the case with those MPs that you mentioned. They seek to exploit our openness, our transparency, our freedoms of expression. And you were talking about that just earlier, to raise tensions, to raise disagreements and conspiracies here in the UK. And I'm pleased that the Deputy Prime Minister is going to finally hold China to account and to challenge this, because otherwise these behaviours become normalised. And it's worth stressing it's not just the UK that's being targeted in this way, but many countries across the West. So we do need to establish not just a resilience to be able to defend ourselves and protect ourselves and call this out, but also what are the international standards for us to be able to operate, given that the digital sphere is now becoming to dominate every aspect of our lives?
I'm a bit baffled, Tobias, I can't lie. So just explain to us the danger, though, because there are two issues here, aren't there? There is the surveillance and the security services, whereby every country is watching every other country. We can sit here naively and pretend we don't do it, but we're doing it as well. And China are doing that at us. But I think what you're talking about are the bot farms, the industrial scale manipulation of the narrative along social media lines. But that just takes really firm political leadership in this country, doesn't it? And we just have to ignore a lot of it.
Well, we simply can't ignore it, because you're absolutely right about those bot farms. And the introduction of artificial intelligence and quantum computing is allowing countries such as China to do this on a scale that we've never imagined before. And if you can then see how they can influence social media by agreeing and liking certain conspiracy theories, or agreeing and liking certain smears about, let's say, parliamentarians and so forth, that could affect the outcomes of elections and so on. And that's why it's then important that we absolutely have a robust capability. The UK National Security Act that was introduced last year looks at hostile activity from foreign states, or indeed those acting in those countries as well. What are the espionage offences that we can then point in that direction? But there is a bigger picture, as you say, that we need to agree on what the international norms are. And we're really nowhere close to that, simply because these countries operate in isolation, but with access to our internet, with access to all, in order to harvest that data itself. But it's also more blunt. I did a visit to Taiwan last year, and I praised the democracy that I saw there. I then got a letter from the Chinese embassy saying no good comes to those who interfere in other states' affairs. Now, I had to take that letter to the Speaker of the House, and I'm pleased that he then approached the Chinese embassy to say, you cannot speak to parliamentarians. You cannot threaten parliamentarians in this way. But this has now become the norm from China, I'm afraid, to threaten us, because we're critical about what China is doing and where China wants to take the world.
But what's the solution? Because it sounds a little bit like you're nudging towards a world in which we have our freedom of expression compromised, so as to somehow avoid the nefarious intent of China. But what you're going to do by doing that is become more Chinese and shut down the British population.
No, what we're seeing today is China being called out for it. There's been a hesitance, and I think we've discussed this on your program in the past, of not knowing where China is going to go. What is their long-term intentions? They are seeking to exploit perhaps the timidity of our global order. They want their own interpretation. They're linking up with other nations as well. They're tying in other countries in their One Belt, One Road programs. So we're ending up getting a splintering of our world, as you imply, in fact, into two spheres of competing influence: the West, and indeed then the China, Russia, Iran axis, and then much of the rest of the world, the global South, for example, watching to see which way this is going to play out. And we need to be much more robust in standing up to China.
What we're going to do, we're going to put some sanctions on these Chinese politicians. They don't care. They couldn't care less.
We've entered a new Cold War, let's call it as it is, with China, and that's happening with trade and so forth. As I say, these blocs that are competing with each other. The big difference between the last Cold War and this one is that China requires access to the international community for trade. And if we're a bit more robust about trading on terms that meet international standards, then they will then conform to the global order that we all agree with. If we don't do anything about it, then absolutely, as you imply, they'll continue exploiting it, and we'll continue to get hit by cyber attacks.
OK, all right. Thank you, Tobias Ellwood there, former chair of the Defence Select
Sarah, we've run out of time.
We've run out of time, but I find that a little bit scary. I think that raised more questions than answers. Don't go anywhere. We've got more to come.
Yeah, we could.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. After a quieter end to the weekend, things are turning more unsettled, I'm afraid, once we head through the new working week. Further spells of wind and rain to come across all areas, and that wet and windy weather is already pushing across western and southwestern parts of the UK. I think as we go through the day today, we could see some particularly heavy rain across the southwest of England, and that will start to turn to snow as it reaches colder air north of the central belt across parts of Scotland, especially later on this afternoon. Towards the southeast, we'll see the best of the brightness, although there will be some brighter skies towards the far northeast of Scotland, coupled with some wintry showers too. In that sunshine in the southeast, we'll peak at 12 Celsius, 54 in Fahrenheit, but it will be a colder afternoon towards the north. Turning very unsettled across Scotland then as we go through the overnight period tomorrow night into Tuesday. A warning comes into force at midnight because see some heavy rain at low levels, snow across the hills, up to 20 centimetres or so of snow as by the time we get into Tuesday morning. And elsewhere, it's a fairly mixed picture. Some clear spells, but also showers or longer spells of rain never too far away. But those temperatures generally hold up, at least away from the north, where we will see a bit of a frost. Into Tuesday then, certainly through the morning, a very unsettled picture once again across Scotland. Further rain and snow to come. Snow again mainly on the hills. And elsewhere, it's a case of sunshine, but with showers or longer spells of rain once again never too far away. And the temperatures will be struggling on Tuesday. No better than 10 or 11 Celsius towards the south. 11 is 52 in Fahrenheit, nearer 4 or 5 degrees in the north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner just like Phil?
Obviously, whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
Enter our massive spring giveaway. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can the Church of England not spend their money as they wish?
The Church of England can do amazing things for this country and for the world, and I'm not sure why it's chosen to focus on this specific issue. You know, one of the causes that I've always thought the Church was very good at were things called almshouses, which were basically houses that would be built on church estates for the needy. Not only did they want to spend £100 million on this fund, that they wanted to spend £1 billion on reparations as well. Well, why not spend £100 million or £1 billion on a new generation of almshouses, as opposed to just helping one group of people, black British people? Why not just help all people in need?
Alex?
Well, I just don't understand what the Church of England is trying to do. It's on its deathbed.
Congregations have reduced. I mean, deathbed is maybe a little...
well, look, if we look over 20 years, it's dramatically lower than it used to be. And a lot of criticism from actual Christians come from the values that the Church of England are now propagating. And Justin Welby has a lot to answer for because, you know, not only are we seeing in the news this mass conversion of illegal immigrants to a gay mass system in the UK, but now we're seeing them spending money... And as Albie actually pointed out correctly, in a way that doesn't really benefit broader society, it benefits a very small group of people. So I just don't know where it's going to end. This committee has also said £1 billion's not enough. It's 100 million, sorry.
Church commissioners are now hoping for a target of £1 billion.
I mean, it's woke nonsense, isn't it?
You could make the argument that this is charity. Justin Welby's job is to be a virtue signaller, is it not?
Should charity discriminate? I mean, that's what he's saying. We're only going to give this to people from a specific skin colour or background. I don't think that's very Christian of them.
It is 10 o'clock on Monday, the 25th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
It's called a nuclear national plan. Rishi Sunak is leading a rallying call for a national endeavour for the country to unite behind nuclear power in the civil and defence sectors. Will it hit? Will his £200 million investment yield any results?
And tractor farmers revolt as tractors roll towards Westminster in protest at cheap food imports being labelled British produce. Should the government be doing more to safeguard our agricultural sector? Yes, in my opinion.
And the Chinese cyber attack, a crossbench delegation of MPs are going to a briefing today with Alison Giles, who's Parliament's Director of Security, and Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister's, warning that Beijing was behind an attack on the personal details of 40 million voters in a hack on the Electoral Commission. How do we protect ourselves from the cyber warfare?
I'm a big fan of privacy, but I'm still a bit baffled how China, looking at the electoral roll, poses any threat to our democracy.
Well, I always think, every time I use my Oyster card, all the information I've got on that.
Well, yeah.
And every time you go on the internet, you're flooded with advertisements because they know what you've bought recently.
Yeah.
So, of course, China know all this, but... and do we not do the same to them?
What are they up to? I would think so, wouldn't you? I'm a bit baffled, are you? GBViews at gbnews.com. If you can clarify the situation for me, do let me know. And we will be, I imagine, taking some of Oliver Dowden's speech, or at least relaying to you what Oliver Dowden says this morning, because perhaps there is more significance to this than we realise.
And I suppose for once it might even be an interesting speech by Oliver Dowden.
First, though, your very interesting news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you very much and good morning. It's 10:02. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says the government will stop at nothing to protect Britons from cyber attacks ahead of the expected announcement of fresh sanctions against China. The government is set to sanction individuals believed to be involved in recent cyber attacks, which saw hackers access millions of voters' personal details. Several MPs and peers who've been critical of Beijing are thought to have also been targeted. It comes after a report found Britain is unprepared for a large-scale ransomware attack due to, quote, a lack of investment. A £200 million package of investment aimed at securing the future of the country's nuclear industry will be announced today. Rishi Sunak will declare a critical national endeavour as he vows to strengthen the nuclear industry and boost jobs. He'll introduce a new fund backed by £20 million a year in public money for the next decade to support growth in Barrow-in-Furness, the home of Britain's submarine programmes. The government says the money will provide grants to local organisations and improvements to transport and health projects. Minister for Energy Security and Net Zero Andrew Bowie told GB News it's also a bonus for job creation in parts of the country where they're desperately needed.
The huge benefits of all of this investment in new technologies, including nuclear, is that we're going to be creating hundreds of thousands of new high-wage, high-skilled jobs the length and breadth of the country, many in places where high-wage jobs are actually at a premium. And that's why I'm so excited about the investment that we are making today in Sizewell C, in Hinkley Point C, and a 3rd gigawatt scale project coming down the line after that, and our small modular reactor programme. This is going to create a whole new range of energy technologies to support our transition to become more energy secure and independent.
Shadow Wales Secretary Joe Stevens says Labour welcomes the move.
It's the first duty of any government to protect the nation, and our support for the deterrent is total. You know, it's a cornerstone of national security. So we welcome, at long last, a defence nuclear strategy from the government. We've long argued for ministers to secure jobs in Barrow, for example, and across the submarine supply and into the nuclear sector.
Well, that as the Labour leader's promising to take back control of our national energy security as he pledges investment for homegrown power generation. Sir Keir Starmer's pledging an £8.3 billion boost as part of efforts to get President Putin's, quote, boot off our throat. It'll create thousands of jobs and cut bills for families. Thousands of junior doctors in Wales are striking for 96 hours. It's the 3rd time they've held strikes this year in their ongoing pay dispute. The industrial action will see appointments at hospitals and GPs postponed across the country. They're walking out until 7 o'clock Friday morning. The British Medical Association's arguing for better pay, insisting doctors' salaries have dropped by almost a third in 15 years. More than 27,000 healthcare workers are set to receive 2 one-off payments worth up to £3,000. The payments will benefit community nurses, sexual health workers, physiotherapists and other frontline workers at non-NHS organisations. It's to recognise the role they play at charities and local authorities. Last year, more than 1 million NHS staff received 2 one-off payments alongside a 5% pay rise. Chilling levels of harassment are posing a serious threat to schools, according to an independent government advisor. A review led by Dame Sarah Khan will be published today, showing more than 75% of the public feel they can't speak their mind. It suggests many people feel society has become more divisive and cites the case of a teacher who went into hiding after showing a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad during a class. It's understood the report will recommend a series of measures, including a ban on protests within 150 metres of schools. The Home Office is launching social media adverts to deter Vietnamese nationals from travelling to the UK illegally in small boats. The government says an increasing number of migrants coming via the channel are from Vietnam. New ads, building on similar ones already used in Albania, will be written in Vietnamese and set out risks of being exploited by smuggling gangs who profit from facilitating small boat crossings. And more than 14 million Easter getaway trips are expected over the weekend, causing travel disruption for many across the country. The RAC is warning that journeys on popular routes could take twice as long as usual, as the bank holiday weekend leads into a 2-week school holiday. Trains will also be stopped as Network Rail carries out engineering works on the West Coast main lines between Good Friday and Easter Monday. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 10:07 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
Well, the Prime Minister is going to be in Barrow and he's going to pledge funding for the UK's nuclear deterrent in a bid to strengthen our defences against the growing threat of Russia. £20 million, in fact.
That's right. Well, the industry is set to receive more than $760 million over the next decade, and apparently it's going to create 40,000 new jobs by 2030.
So earlier we spoke to the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales, Joe Stevens, on Labour's reaction to the plans.
It's the first duty of any government to protect the nation, and our support for the deterrent is total. You know, it's a cornerstone of national security. So we welcome, at long last, a defence nuclear strategy from the government. We've long argued for ministers to secure jobs in Barrow, for example, and across the submarine supply and into the nuclear sector.
I'm puzzled by this. Piers Pottinger, who is our expert...
We're puzzled by a lot, Andrew and I, this morning. It's a morning of befuddlement, isn't it?
Former advisor to various Conservative Prime Ministers. What is he doing? He's in fact announcing £20 million of public money today to support the nuclear industry in Barrow and Furness, 180 million over the next decade when he won't be Prime Minister anyway. It feels to me like he's fiddling while Rome's burning.
I think that's exactly the expression I would have used. I mean, this isn't going to make a difference in any way. And I don't think the general public... I mean, 20 million in nuclear terms is nothing.
Peanuts.
And he's talking about 200 million over a period of time. But even that is peanuts in nuclear terms. And defence spending has gone down.
Yeah, nothing for it in the budget at all.
He pledged to put it up and hasn't done so. And I think most people would, given the precarious times we live in, I think most people would like to see the defence spending greatly enhanced and our armed forces given the military wherewithal they need, weapons, ammunition, kit, to be able to be the supreme fighting force they once were.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our military, marvellous people though they are now declining in numbers and also declining in efficiency.
Isn't this what happens, Piers, when you have a culture, and it's not just the Conservatives, every political party that decides everything based on focus groups. They will clearly have done a focus group that has said, we feel that our national safety is the top of our priority list as voters and we want something to be done about it. But then they go and do something that doesn't resonate with people.
Well, I mean, this isn't going to make any difference at all to Rishi's own personal position and the government's position. And if we've seen that the Tory councillors in a poll are talking about wanting Penny Mordaunt as leader. Mind you, it was only 390 councillors, and in third place came Nigel Farage, who as yet isn't the leader or even a member of the Conservative Party. But as I've said many times on this programme, if Nigel Farage was leading the Conservatives, they would have a chance of winning. which they don't at the moment. It looks like being a landslide to Labour and dreadful for the country's future. Instead of addressing this and coming out guns blazing, to use that, the only nuclear thing Rishi's facing is his own election, which is going to be a disaster.
He's up in Barrow because, of course, that's where they're building the new Trident submarine. But a Trident submarine is billions of pounds, and there's £20 million. I mean, it's peanuts.
I'm afraid it's nonsense. And this really is indicative of how this government seems to be completely distanced from reality. And I don't think they have any kind of concept of what people want. If they did, for example, the local elections coming up, we have the mayoral election in London, which is a very significant election and resonates across the country. Why didn't the Conservatives put up a serious candidate and put all their efforts behind the candidate? Instead of which, we've got this rather unfortunate woman who keeps making terrible gaffes when she speaks, who looks like handing it back to the dreadful Sadiq Khan, who's going to... I mean, and it could have been a Conservative victory, which would have actually raised morale. But the Conservatives decided they had no chance of winning, weren't going to bother, so they've let this hopeless candidate go forward.
There was a time when I thought there would be a grid in number 10, and on the grid they'd have all the announcements they're going to make, and you would be firing off really interesting policy ideas, policy initiatives.
But it's called planning and strategy.
Yeah, but instead we had a budget, and then it sank without trace. The week after the budget, instead of talking about the cut in national insurance, we had a big debate on extremism with Michael Gove.
Yeah.
Why?
The whole thing is it doesn't sort of...
Why then?
Again, it doesn't resonate with the electorate. It's completely wrong. And I mean, going back to the mayoral election, here was a golden opportunity, actually, for Penny Mordaunt. If she had stood for mayor, because she's probably going to lose her seat in the next election. So it would be a very big mistake to make her the leader before the election and then have her lose her seat. That would be terrible and again, a gift to the Labour Party.
The people say that Penny Mordaunt would quite like the leadership now because if you're Prime Minister in a constituency, people think, oh, I quite like to vote, quite like having my local MP as the Prime Minister. It might give her a few more thousand votes, might save her seat.
I don't think there's a hope in hell of her saving her seat. I think her majority is less than 1,000. And I don't think...
It's 15,000.
It's 15,000. Oh, sorry.
But if you looked at that poll in the Mail on Sunday recently, you need a majority of 20,000 to be sure of winning.
Yeah, well, I mean, she could lose her seat.
Yeah.
But if she stood as mayor, she's got a bit of resonance with the people, even though I think she's a lightweight.
She can wield a ceremonial
and she hasn't proved herself in any role she's had, other than wielding the sword.
Yeah.
But that's just a bit of showbiz.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you know, the party, the Conservative Party, has lost its kind of instinct, its political instinct, how to actually engage with the electorate.
I mean, if Susan Hall, the Conservatives' candidate for London Mayor, was here, she probably would like to defend herself against accusations that she's quite so useless. But I completely see where you're coming from in that she wasn't what you might call a blue ribbon candidate, and she sort of came out of nowhere, and most people probably wouldn't know her name even to this day.
Exactly. and I mean, she's a one policy, which is ULEZ. And Sadiq Khan has very cleverly rather buried that for the time being.
I have to say, I like Susan Hall. When we've met her, we met her at the... Very pleasant. And also off camera, she was saying, you know, they really want me to do my hair and do my makeup differently, and they want to brush me up. She's like, but it's just not me, and this is me, and take me or leave me. And I thought, use that then. But, like, tell the public that. Like, be authentic.
Well, I think more Londoners have heard of Count Binface.
That's the problem.
And I think he'll probably do rather well in this election if he's standing again.
The leadership have given her no support. I mean, when did you last see Rishi Sunak with... That's the problem. Before we let you go, you've advised the royal family over the years.
Yes.
How well did she do on Friday, Catherine?
Well, it was tremendous,
Wales, wasn't
it was very moving.
Yeah.
And it was very brave, courageous, and she did it with great dignity. And It had me in tears. It nearly had me in tears again now. And I hope it does silence all those ghastly conspiracy theorist cretins who've been peddling such appalling rubbish for so long, and so distressing rubbish. And I hope it puts an end to it properly.
And she's now on holiday with her family.
As she should be.
Absolutely certain her mum won't be far away.
I'm sure. And I mean, they're a very strong family. It's wonderful to see the family come together. I think this is very uniting for the royal family as well. Out of every tragedy comes something positive. And Kate's a positive person, and she made that clear in her message. It was a terrifically good message for the whole country, in the sense of that she is bearing this terrible affliction with such dignity.
I think that's absolutely right. And
Piers.
we wish her well.
Thank you, we do. Now, as tractors roll into Westminster today, is the government facing a rural revolt of British farmers? There we go, sign there saying no farmers, no food. That's the campaign that is trying to alert us all to the plight of our farmers, and boy, do we need them in existence. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Now, reports suggest that Boris Johnson could make a general election comeback for the Tories, with the former Prime Minister expected to campaign for the Conservatives in red wall seats, although not stand in one himself.
Yes, he wants to take the fight to Keir Starmer. So, GB News East Midlands reporter Will Hollis has been in Bassetlaw asking locals whether they want to see Boris make a comeback.
I actually used to like Boris Johnson, but he let me down with COVID, and so therefore I won't be voting Conservative anymore. I did do, but not anymore.
Not for me and anybody else here, because from day one he's been a liar all along. Don't vote for him. Stick with Labour.
I like Boris Johnson, to be honest with you, and I think it could do with a boost for Conservatives. I've always been a Labour voter myself, like, but no, I went to Conservative.
Personally, not for me, no. He's not done anything to make any arrangements to make this town better.
When he was in charge of the Conservative Party, all he thought about was the upper class, not the working class, because he was telling everybody to stay at home during COVID, and what did he do? He had an house party.
Well, there you go, the views of the people of Bassetlaw. Not so keen
He was telling
overall.
people to stay at home. There's no suggestion he didn't stay at home.
Well, no. But I guess there's mixed reviews on whether Boris Johnson's to make a comeback. I guess the idea is that he'll appeal to red wall voters far more than Rishi Sunak. So if they can use him up there, then maybe he'll help them out. And
Although
I think they want to get David Cameron to campaign in the blue wall, in the Shires, because he goes down well there.
Allies of Boris Johnson have been pouring cold water on this report, of course. Nadine Dorries tweeting earlier today that Rishi and Boris actually haven't spoken in the last year.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other. Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the studio with us is the former Labour advisor Matthew Larser without his tie, and the author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe. What happened to your Labour Party red tie that you always wear?
I lent it to a friend for his Labour selection conference last year, and he only gave it back a year later, and it's got a stain on it. So the cheeky whatnot.
Tells you everything you need to know about Labour candidates.
Yeah, and you only have one tie.
No, I put it on here, Andrew. I have a whole selection at home, and I will look smarter next week, I promise.
I think you look smart enough.
Thank you. And you look absolutely wonderful, as always,
Thank
Bev.
you, darling.
I'm not commenting on Mr Pearce.
Now then, Emma, we're a little bit... Andrew and I spend a lot of time on this breakfast bar being a bit befuddled by what's going on in the world.
Sceptical as well.
And very sceptical.
And open.
And but today we are genuinely... What is this big deal about China
And it's been...
looking at 40 million voters? Anyone can see that electoral roll information.
Times calls it a malign cyber attack on the election watchdog. It began in August 2021. It wasn't identified till October 22. It is a public document, the electoral.
It is, which you can buy, which marketing firms have access to. It's also in the wake of a couple of reports over the weekend that Beijing are going after, you know, some of the Beijing hawks, these sort of China hawks, in Parliament, Lords and
Smith, people
MPs.
like that.
Yeah, exactly. And this story on the front of the Telegraph, China and Russia behind slurs on the princess. So they're talking about hostile state actors like China, Russia and Iran whipping up social media frenzied attacks on Princess Catherine. And so we've got this weird atmosphere at the moment where we're basically saying, what's going on with Beijing? They're attacking us, they're infiltrating us. All of this stuff, surely. I mean, I'm as baffled as you are. Yeah. But maybe Matthew be able to enlighten us.
What's it us towards, Matthew?
Well, I'm not quite... I mean, what's quite interesting about today's story is there's a little political implication in it, that originally this was actually discovered some time ago because it actually relates back to the cyber attack was between August 2021 and October 2022, and it was discovered, and then obviously it takes a while to do it. So apparently last year the government was going to impose extra travel bans on Chinese representatives, particularly those who've been responsible for the human rights crackdown, the extra law in Hong Kong.
They'd be quaking in their boots.
Well, you think they'd be quaking in their boots at that? But even that, not exactly a massive measure, that was put into abeyance, put on pause at about the same time.
David
Cameron was appointed Foreign Secretary. So the cynics are saying, was that a coincidence?
Well, because Cameron, if we remember when he was Prime Minister, famously he had a pint in the local pub at Chequers. He endorsed, pursued aggressively.
And also in his post-Prime Ministerial money-making, he also did a lot with the Chinese as well. So basically, I think this is part of a pattern where sceptics are saying, within the Tory party actually, are saying Cameron, you're trying to put a warning shot across Cameron's bows about China.
But I'm still baffled about this because, look, in the Sunday Times yesterday, it's in the papers again today, Emma, the Chinese are about to probably spend £1 billion investing in an electric vehicle battery plant in Coventry, 6,000 jobs. Hurrah, we're all thrilled about that. Or are we? Because that's the Chinese state. Because everything is the Chinese state.
And we freely allow TikTok in this country, which they don't allow in their own country. But every time,
for kids anyway.
Exactly. And every time you turn on every time you're looking at TikTok, it says, "Can you turn on your camera?" La 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 la. And the worry is that MPs and people like that have been spied on and bugged within the Houses of Parliament potentially. This whole thing about the Princess of Wales apparently is about destabilising the nation, the fabric of our institutions. So there's this odd climate at the moment where we are. And obviously we know these are hostile states. I'm not saying that is new. But I just wonder whether this is a smokescreen for something else that's going on.
But the Americans hacked the phone of Angela Merkel when she was the German Chancellor.
So the Americans are probably already listening to you.
Everybody's at it.
They're all at it.
And that's why we have things like MI5 and MI6 and GCHQ. Isn't that their job?
GCHQ in Cheltenham is the most sophisticated listening device probably in the world.
Exactly.
And we are doing the same to the Chinese.
Well, then our spies need to be better and our security measures need to be better and our MPs need to be more careful.
And if they were just too mean to pay for the Electoral Commission...
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can go to your local library and copy it out, photocopy it.
It is there for free.
For free. But yeah, I mean, all marketeers buy it. So I think it's a slightly overblown story, but I think the politics of it, the attack on Cameron is
and of course, Oliver Dowden will make a speech in the Commons today about that, and that will be one of the questions, because, of course, Cameron being Foreign Secretary won't be in the Commons.
Exactly, because he can't answer the questions, because, you know, he remains in the Lords. Never mind, but, of course, he's going to be coming back as Prime Minister, so we hear occasionally, every other week, there's a briefing on there.
Don't believe that.
No, I don't.
The Tory party will not have him back as their leader. Trust me.
Absolutely.
I was at a Conservative Association the other week. I was doing a fundraiser for a mate, and I said, so how many of you would like to see David... We didn't even want him back as Foreign Secretary.
And what about Penny?
What
do the grassroots think about Penny?
They think she's very nice, and they think she's got nice hair.
It's just not good enough. Are these the best
not
candidates?
A qualification for being Prime Minister.
She needs the department to run.
Give me strength.
No, well, I thought that was a ludicrous outfit, but I'm the only one who thinks that.
I thought it was ludicrous too.
I mean, this is ridiculous. Is this the best we've got?
Is this the best we've got? And she won't be Prime Minister anyway. She would be, at best, you know, the opposition, the leader of the opposition.
Well, she's got to hold her seat. Which
See what?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's going to look great.
Just pulling these stories together, and particularly with the reaction that this furore over the health journey that the Princess of Wales has been on the last few weeks. God knows, it feels like it's about 6 months, but it's only a matter of weeks.
Yeah, we were sitting here when the statement was released about the photo.
And so much of the rhetoric around this is we have to clamp down on disinformation. We have to silence the internet. We have to keep people from speaking. Where are you on that, Matthew? Because my gut instinct is be careful that we don't take a step.
I think we should let a thousand voices have their say, and then we can ourselves decide what is important. I actually think it's really important. It's going to be quite unpopular because remember media studies, which was much mocked in the 80s and 90s. Actually, I think we do need to make sure that our kids in school can have actually the sense that they can do the filtering themselves rather than relying on somebody else. So it's kind of media literacy rather than studies, I would say. And actually, that's quite a good skill because it means you can examine an argument in sort of good old Oxbridge fashion, as it were, but just examining, you know, so if you can, you know, look at and sift through TikToks and...
Yeah, and Emma, there was the video of the Princess of Wales was put through, because one of the theories, of course, is that it is an AI-generated video. So somebody had put it through some AI assessment software and concluded that it was 97% likely that that is an AI video, that's not really her. Then somebody put a picture of Princess Diana through the same software, and that concluded that it was AI-generated, and it was a genuine picture.
And it was 30 years before.
It was 30 years ago, you know. So, and the rest. So there is something about creating another generation of critical thinkers who can scrutinise content and decide what is truth, what is fiction and what is deliberately manipulated.
I just find this all so depressing. I mean, that is absolutely ludicrous. People have way too much time on their hands if they're doing nonsense like that.
Yes.
And the nastiness and all the kind of, you know, all the conspiracy theories have been, I think, really vile. OK, she said what she said. She's clearly not well. She's been incredibly brave. Leave her alone on that one. But in terms of the whole kind of, can we crack down on the trolls, should we? You know, I'm the only one who's been saying all along the internet is a vile, vile place. The whole online world is a horrible place for our children. No, it is. And look where we've got to. We've got a generation of young people signed off with anxiety and depression because there's no social contact with other people. They can't look other people in the face. They get stressed out by the idea of going to an interview and talking to people face to face. The country's in the doldrums.
Well,
you know, the country's falling apart.
It goes back to Bev's view. They shouldn't have a smartphone before they're 16.
No, that's what I've been saying all along.
Yeah.
But also, when the government say they're going to crack down, they can't even, you know, they can't even regulate the most basic websites. So it's all just absolutely...
They can't sort their own iPads out. I was going to say, in Scotland, of course, they can't have got to stop MPs, MSPs getting the Chinese because they were all busy watching Rangers matches with their kids.
Well, at least they're outdoors doing something.
But, you know, there was this view that MPs should not use TikTok because of the Chinese. I pointed this out in the Mail recently. Who is the MP that is still using TikTok? Grant Shapps, who happens to be our Secretary of State for Defence, for God's sake.
Well, interestingly...
So he's not taking it.
So today, the new Taoiseach was announced yesterday. It'll be the H37, and he's known as the TikTok Taoiseach because he's obsessed with TikTok, and that's how he made his name, as the sort of... He's a 37 as the social media king. I was watching Irish TV last night, and they would put a montage of his TikToks on. So he's not worried about his phone being hacked. Obviously, that's in Ireland, but it gives you an indication.
But Secretary of State Defence will know his phone is being hacked, so he's carrying on TikTok because he obviously...
I mean, unless he's got a separate device that he just uses for TikTok.
Maybe,
But still, but that just tells me that Grant Shapps is more concerned...
Why am I defending Grant Shapps?
...than his popularity and his following for when he's not a politician anymore.
Well, I make the point it shows he's on leadership manoeuvres, but then which Tory cabinet
isn't exactly.
Fine, then he should have a small team who do his TikTok. I mean, what is he doing on TikTok? We need serious men, I was going to say serious men, we need serious politicians for serious times, and look at what's happening to this country while our politicians are messing around on TikTok.
I know, and we've got the Prime Minister today announcing £20 million talking of defence for the nuclear.
Yeah, well, of course, I would like to remind everybody that Barrow-in-Furness is historically a marginal seat, so maybe...
It used to be.
Yeah, it will be this time. It isn't currently.
Probably just about repair the roof on the building.
It was Lord Warney who we had on this programme last week. Yeah. What was his name? John Woodcock. He was a Labour MP there.
Absolutely.
And he did go Tory last time.
He did.
You see, the thing is, what these stories are all about is trust. It's all underpinned by the concept, the notion of trust. We had 4 years till the first day of lockdown, of course, was the anniversary on Friday. Yeah. And I tweeted to say, what's changed? I'm interested what's changed for people in that 4 years, because everything changed for me. And the vast majority of respondents said trust. Matthew. Trust in the government, trust in the media, trust in medics, trust in our regulatory authorities. How do we ever get that back?
Because what happened is whatever you think would happen is kind of an end to scepticism. We weren't allowed to be sceptical for a year. And anybody who was a bit sceptical, whether it was a little bit sceptical or a lot sceptical, was regarded as a pariah. So I think that, you know, when you're not... What we're good at in Britain is questioning authority, speaking truth unto power.
And we should.
And we weren't allowed to. And, of course, the Tories got in trouble last week for sort of tweeting, and probably did a TikTok too, about their record on lockdown and about how they'd, you know, Rishi had saved all the businesses in furlough. So maybe there's quite a lot of kickback on that.
As well as trust, it was also about freedom, Bev, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It really was about the first time I'm just thinking back 4 years, being told we couldn't leave our homes, being told our children couldn't attend school. The most basic human freedoms were suddenly...
Sit on a park bench.
And, of course, Matthew, of course, likes to make a political point here, taking at the Tories. Let's remember, if Labour had been in power, we'd probably still be in lockdown.
I mean, I was one of the very few people... I was one of the very few people who were trying to urge the Labour Party to take the Swedish approach. Our comrades and Social Democrats in Sweden, who took a much more sensible approach, in my view.
Shouldn't forget that.
And I never forgive Starmer for every
severely.
time he was on the telly saying this government aren't doing enough, they need to lock down more, close schools more mask mandates. I can't forgive either side for them, but anyway. Right, we discussed earlier, thanks both, the London mayoral race. We just got to remind ourselves of the candidates who are standing. Sadiq Khan is for Labour, Susan Hall, the Conservatives, Rob Blackie, Lib Dem.
Then we've got Zoe Garbett, Green, Howard Cox, Reform, Amy Gallagher, Social Democratic Party, Brian Rose, London Real, Count Binface.
London Real is Brian Rose. Count Binface is an independent.
That's right.
It's a bit confusing. Cheyenne Batra is an independent. Natalie Campbell is an independent. Tarim Guliati is an independent. And Andreas Mishley is also independent.
May the 2nd, of course. Now, still to come. The latest on the farmers' battle to save British food security. Some foreign food is apparently being labelled as British. Outrageous. All that and more with your morning news with Tatiana.
Andrew, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says the government will stop at nothing to protect Britons from cyber attacks ahead of the expected announcement of fresh sanctions against Russia. The government set to sanction individuals believed to be involved in recent cyber attacks, which saw hackers access millions of voters' personal details. Several MPs and peers who've been critical of Beijing are thought to have also been targeted. It comes after a report found Britain is unprepared for a large-scale ransomware attack due to, quote, a lack of investment. A £200 million package of investment aimed at securing the future of the country's nuclear industry will be unveiled today. Rishi Sunak will declare a critical national endeavour as he vows to strengthen the nuclear industry and boost jobs. He'll introduce a new fund backed by £20 million in public money to support growth in Barrow-in-Furness, the home of Britain's submarine programmes, and a further £180 million a year over the next decade, which Downing Street says would provide grants to local organisations and improve transport and health outcomes in the area. The Labour leader is promising to take back control of our national energy security as he pledges investment for homegrown power generation. Sir Keir Starmer's pledging an £8.3 billion boost as part of efforts to get President Putin's, quote, boot off our throat. It'll create thousands of jobs and cut bills for families. Ofgem has announced it's launching a consultation on the future of the energy price cap. It includes a new dynamic price cap based on the time of day households use their energy, as well as a targeted cap, which could be based on vulnerability or setting a limit between a supplier's default tariff and tariffs available in the market. And more than 14 million journeys for Easter getaways are expected over the weekend, causing travel disruption for many across the country. The RAC is warning that journeys on popular routes could take twice as long as usual, as the bank holiday weekend leads into a 2-week school holiday. Trains will also be stopped as Network Rail carries out engineering works on the West Coast main line between Good Friday and Easter Monday. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2617 and €1.1663. The price of gold is £1,719.89 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,905 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about Sebastian? It really amazes me how a mother who can lose a child in such a shocking and unexpected way, so little, so precious, can then turn that grief into something so positive. How did you find the strength to get up, get a camera crew, as you say, travel to the other side of the world and investigate all of this?
I was angry at Sebastian for dying. You feel like saying, God, 32 years later and I can still get very, very upset about it. I was angry that something that while he was born and lived with me and slept and then died, they were actively campaigning in New Zealand to try and stop this happening because they had a very high cot death rate there. They had the lady, the Anne Diamond, if you like, of New Zealand, a television presenter called Judy Bailey, went on telly every night and said, if you're just about to put your baby down to sleep, put him on his or her back, not the tummy, and this will help. And their cot death rate plummeted. And I went out to New Zealand and met her, and it was anger that drove me to come back and demand that we have the same advert here, the same campaign. And of course, I got all this complete nonsense from the Department of Health saying, oh, young mothers do not watch television, I was told. In other words, while New Zealand mums were being told how to save their babies' lives, we actively denied British mums that advice during the time that Sebastian and others were dying.
And the other point I suppose to make is it's helpful to educate all generations, because when I had my babies, my mum would say, he's not settling, just stick him on his tummy, he'll be much happier. That's what we did with you. And we had to say, well, things have changed, and, yes. But it's about educating everybody, because it's not just the mums that get their hands on the babies.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. You're very vexed about these China cyber attacks. Colin says, what the hell is our Secret Service doing? They've only just realised what China's up to. You just couldn't make it up.
We could have told you.
We knew. We're not surprised. So Colin, we agree with you. Quite why it's taken GCHQ or MI6 or whoever it is, MI5, it'd be MI5, to know what's going on.
And Rod has said, thank you, Rod, if you know how you vote, if they know how you vote, coupled with mass data held also on you, do you not believe they can influence your decision-making process in any way? They won't know.
I'm not sure they know how you vote, because that's
not on record anyway, is it?
It is not.
And Ken says these are only able to be carried out because of computers, internet, mobile phones, etc. It seems to me that these inventions are ruining our lives, and therefore we were much safer and much happier without these inventions. There is a school of thought that would agree with that, Ken, very much so.
I sort of often think it myself, really.
Me too.
The dark web. I mean, how many people have been murdered because of the dark web?
You do wonder as well.
Brianna Jai.
Yeah, you do wonder. I look at my kids' generation and I wonder whether they will grow up and have a complete rejection of all of this, and they will just say enough, because they will think we were all insane for having become so addicted to our phones. I wonder whether, as a generation after generation do, they will reject it. I hope so. Anyway, I'm trying to get them to do that in my house. It's not really working.
The other day I was on a tube train the other day. Everybody was on their phone.
Everybody.
And I thought, isn't the tube the one place you just want to give it a break?
You can't
read
get
a
any
book
signal.
or read news, but you haven't got a signal. So what are they doing on their phone? Playing games.
Yeah, I think we're genuinely losing something. Eye contact, humanity, connection.
Yeah, nobody talks to anybody.
Pat says, isn't it strange that our government blames China for cyber attacks and the like, and yet David Cameron has been working closely with them and now winds back some of the restrictions that have been put in place. Somebody else made that comment earlier on the show, didn't they? And Graham says the first steps of the answer to China's cyber threat is to recognise what they are doing and not to trust them. Wayne, blame Western governments for the rise of China. People were saying this 10 years ago and every country ignored it. That is a really good point, Wayne, because we've taken Chinese investment and obviously our houses are full of items we've bought from made in China.
And if you remember as well, we had to get them out of the 5G. Huawei.
We did.
Get them out, literally extricate them
Yeah,
from
that
us.
was at least one thing I think they did quite well.
Yeah.
And Jan says if they've seen the electoral roll, what else have they been looking at? That's the threat to our democracy. They never do things by halves. I'm much more worried about my own government looking at what I do online, to be fair.
I want to go back, we said before, the electoral roll is a public document which you can access if you go to your library.
gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. Keep your messages coming to us. Now, British farmers are driving their tractors to Westminster today as we speak. They're going to be protesting against cheap food imports and unpopular trade deals.
We can hear from one of them, Windsor and Maidenhead farmer and landowner Colin Rayner, who's on his way to the protest. Colin, morning to you. We know this has been happening in Wales a lot, where the Welsh Labour government is making farmers plant trees instead of putting down for crops and things. What is the problem now in England? Is it to do with foreign labelling?
It's multiple things. We have the political classes that have a dislike to us and are trying to tell us what we're doing in the countryside. We've been looking after the countryside for centuries, where people that have ruined towns now telling us that we need to stop growing food and plant wildflowers. Our family have been farming in Berkshire for nearly 500 years. This may be the last year that we are growing food because this government and all the political classes want us to grow wildflowers. And we are having the real reason we're packing and growing food is we're not making any money. Each day we get another regulation from the government. We're competing against food from being imported from abroad, which is using chemicals that we can't use in this country. And I fear for food security in this country. And we had a debate in the House of Commons last week. The chamber was empty. Our politicians need to hold their heads in shame. And this is time for us to bring the countryside to Westminster and tell them they need to rethink. We need to grow food in the UK. Unfortunately, this madness about growing wildflowers is going throughout Europe and in America. And people say, well, we can import food from South America. South America are cutting down rainforests, reduce soya for the UK markets. We're just exporting our green credentials. And that's the reason today that we're protesting. Last time I protested when I was at college in 1979. I don't know what I was protesting about, but this is the first time I'm protesting since then. That's a long time ago.
Just explain, instead, so that you're going to have to grow the wildflowers, what would you not ordinarily be growing, Colin?
We'll be growing wheat, barley, oilseed rape, maize for cattle feed. And they're paying us £850 a hectare of your money to grow wildflowers. And they're telling us that we are destroying the environment. Our farm in Berkshire was there before Heathrow Airport. Our farm was there before they built Slough Station. Our farm was there before they built canals. But hey-ho, my cows and me as a farmer are blamed for destroying the planet.
Colin, what happens if you ignore them? If you ignore the government and you say, no, you can get lost with your wildflowers, I'm keeping my crops here, what happens then?
I go bankrupt because they're not giving us, they're giving us subsidy to grow wildflowers. We don't get any subsidy for growing food. At the moment, we're losing money growing food. Every farmer in this country is subsidising the food production.
So I thought post-Brexit, Colin, this was supposed to be halcyon days for farmers. Clearly not.
It should have been, but our politicians of all political classes have wrecked it for us. have wrecked it. You know, we can produce most of the food that the UK residents need to eat, apart from obviously bananas and grapes and oranges. But we can produce all the flour, we can produce all the meat, we can produce all the vegetables. But we have a government and political classes that are determined to import our food from third world countries where they don't have the same regulations that we have. Each day, we're given another set of regulations by our government. It is absolutely appalling. We've got more people in the office doing paperwork to grow food than actually growing food.
Colin, you have our support. You really do. And I hope it makes an impact today in Westminster. Farmer and landowner Colin Rayner there.
And we'll be there bringing you all the pictures when they arrive. Colin, good luck.
And
500
buy British.
Years. Yeah,
buy British whenever you can. Whenever you can, buy British, particularly farm food. Right, up next, as Oliver Dowden is set to tell MPs that China is behind this attack on the Electoral Commission last year. How can we protect our cyber security? From Beijing, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. After a quieter end to the weekend, things are turning more unsettled, I'm afraid, once we head through the new working week. Further spells of wind and rain to come across all areas, and that wet and windy weather is already pushing across western and southwestern parts of the UK. I think as we go through the day today, we could see some particularly heavy rain across the southwest of England, and that will start to turn to snow as it reaches colder air north of the central belt across parts of Scotland, especially later on this afternoon. Towards the southeast, we'll see the best of the brightness, although there will be some brighter skies towards the far northeast of Scotland, coupled with some wintry showers too. In that sunshine in the southeast, we'll peak at 12 Celsius, 54 in Fahrenheit, but it will be a colder afternoon towards the north. Turning very unsettled across Scotland then as we go through the overnight period tomorrow night into Tuesday. A warning comes into force at midnight. We could see some heavy rain at low levels, snow across the hills, up to 20 centimetres or so of snow as by the time we get into Tuesday morning. And elsewhere, it's a fairly mixed picture. Some clear spells, but also showers or longer spells of rain never too far away. But those temperatures generally hold up, at least away from the north, where we will see a bit of a frost. Into Tuesday then, certainly through the morning, a very unsettled picture once again across Scotland. Further rain and snow to come, snow again mainly on the hills. And elsewhere it's a case of sunshine, but with showers or longer spells of rain once again never too far away. And the temperatures will be struggling on Tuesday, no better than 10 or 11 Celsius towards the south. 11 is 52 in Fahrenheit, nearer 4 or 5 degrees in the north.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Well, China's targeted senior British politicians as part of a state-backed cyber attack, which has spurred a crisis meeting in Westminster later today.
Labour leader Keir Starmer has echoed calls from the government saying that Britain needs to wean itself off China. We're joined in the studio now by Isle of Wight MP Bob Seeley. Bob, we're a little bit baffled by all this morning. Like, governments routinely spy on one another. Obviously, that becomes almost easier in an internet age. But why the panic about this particular incident now?
I think, simply put, because whoever controls data and information controls the future of the world. And this is about what sort of world we're going to be living in, not this month, not this year, but actually in the course of the coming decades. China collects information for different reasons. China collects huge amounts of data on its own people, effectively to stop them having bad thoughts about the government. So this is full-on Orwellian sort of data collection. They steal they steal intellectual property because they want to turbocharge their industrial revolution, so they're just hoovering up data. They're picking up data like this because it's useful to know the addresses, maybe politicians, it's useful to know the addresses of computer engineers in Cambridge and Oxford designing the future, working on AI. It's just useful to have this personal information, but also in 5 or 10 years' time, when you add that information to other information that you've got, you use AI and big data, you can start to manipulate this information to see how people think and to see how you can control humanity.
But on the electoral watch, I mean, Oliver Dowden is going to talk today, the Deputy Prime Minister, about the cyber attack on the Electoral Commission. But the Electoral Commission stuff, it's a public document. You can go to the local library and reference what's on the Electoral Commission, who's there. And
That's true, but you do it one at a time. What you don't do is hoover up 45 million bits of information and stick it into a server in Beijing.
Right, and what can they do with that information that should disturb us?
Immediately now, if you're looking for people's addresses or looking for, let's say you picked up a target, or the Chinese services have picked up a blackmail target who works in AI in Cambridge, or a politician who's up to no good, or a spy, or a government official in a sensitive role, it's just more information. It's their addresses, who they live with, etc. It's useful to have from that point of view.
Why, in case you wish some harm on those people, actual physical harm?
No, well, it could be, but actually much more likely in case you want to target them.
In what way?
It depends who the target is and depends what you're trying to get. A politician, it could be to influence them, to take a more benign line to China. Somebody working in an AI, artificial intelligence factory or a laboratory in Cambridge because you want to approach them, maybe, or you're building up a profile of them, so you need the basic information.
But that's okay.
But in future, it's about AI and big data. So information, who controls information, controls the future. That's the Chinese approach, and it's sadly the correct one.
Well, that sounds a bit like, in order to win this war, we have to also control information in this country. I think that would be a mistake.
We have to defend our own information, and we have to be much more robust in our approach to China.
Be more like China.
No, hold on. OK, there is a subtle but massive difference. OK, there are two visions of the future of the world, Bev. There is effectively the Russia and Chinese vision, which is AI and big data will make, well, worse than that, murdering thugs, will make revolutions against the state impossible. We want a future, genuinely, where AI and big data are used to fulfill and enable human life, but not to oppress humanity and not to oppress freedom of thought. So the future of the world, there's two visions. Closed society, open society. And the more information that closed societies can nick, the better.
So we talk about robust, Bob. We've talked about this factory that's going to open in Coventry possibly later this year or next year, 6,000 jobs, £1 billion investment. Should we be doing those sort of deals? Because aren't the Chinese going to use that factory as a place to spy on people?
I mean, not necessarily. This is the slight problem that we have, and my frustration with this government, which I support for the most part because it's doing really important, good work. We don't have a coherent and consistent approach to China, and we have to have that. You know, people when they say we can't, when folks say we can't shut ourselves off to China, they're right. We can't, but we can be much more robust about putting down our own markers, like the Australians do, and they still do big trade with China. We can do much more to protect ourselves whilst accepting and welcoming
what markers do they put down?
Well, I mean, look, you don't allow the Chinese to buy AI and big data. You do allow them to invest in less sensitive technology and less sensitive investments. So I see nothing wrong with that.
We're running out of time, Bob, but what we've just been talking to a farmer who isn't allowed to grow food, he has to grow flowers, which means what? Which means we're going to end up getting our food from other countries, including China. So it feels like an act of self-harm, the way decisions we're making in this country.
OK, I think that is a bit of a different topic, and I'm delighted that you raise it, because actually we're trying to get an abattoir now on the Isle of Wight, because all our beef... Look, I mean, we're actually making big strides in agriculture in the UK. I disagree with great respect. I think the farmer that you had on is taking a slightly extreme view. I think actually wildflowers are pretty special.
That's his life.
OK, I think Well, I think
he said he will go bankrupt if he has to grow wildflowers. He goes back. Sorry, if he has to grow food, he'll go bankrupt. That should never happen in 2024 in this country.
I don't know the individual case for that farmer, but actually my farmers are telling me that if we can get an abattoir on the Isle of Wight, actually that'll be really good for the future of the island. So what I'm trying to do is post-Brexit, we can get we've got small abattoirs coming back into the UK, so we're trying to get a bit of a grant mixed in with the farmers' own money to build an abattoir on the island, which would be really good for us. So actually there's lots of good things happening in agriculture as well.
OK, all right, Bob, great to see you as always. Bob Seeley there, MP for the beautiful Isle of Wight. Don't go anywhere, it's the weather.
He does explain it very well, doesn't he?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. After a quieter end to the weekend, things are turning more unsettled, I'm afraid, once we head through the new working week. Further spells of wind and rain to come across all areas, and that wet and windy weather is already pushing across western and southwestern parts of the UK. I think as we go through the day today, we could see some particularly heavy rain across the southwest of England, and that will start to turn to snow as it reaches colder air north of the central belt across parts of Scotland, especially later on this afternoon. Towards the southeast, we'll see the best of the brightness, although there will be some brighter skies towards the far northeast of Scotland, coupled with some wintry showers too. In that sunshine in the southeast, we'll peak at 12 Celsius, 54 in Fahrenheit, but it will be a colder afternoon towards the north. Turning very unsettled across Scotland then as we go through the overnight period tomorrow night into Tuesday. A warning comes into force at midnight. We could see some heavy rain at low levels, snow across the hills, up to 20 centimetres or so of snow as by the time we get into Tuesday morning. And elsewhere, it's a fairly mixed picture. Some clear spells, but also showers or longer spells of rain never too far away. But those temperatures generally hold up, at least away from the north, where we will see a bit of a frost. Into Tuesday then, certainly through the morning, a very unsettled picture once again across Scotland. Further rain and snow to come. Snow again mainly on the hills. And elsewhere, it's a case of sunshine, but with showers or longer spells of rain once again never too far away. And the temperatures will be struggling on Tuesday. No better than 10 or 11 Celsius towards the south. 11 is 52 in Fahrenheit, nearer 4 or 5 degrees in the north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the final week to see how you could win big. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash that you could spend however you like. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Monday, the 25th of March. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pierce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. So, a royal apology after it's emerged that rogue states contributed to the destabilising conspiracy theories surrounding the Princess of Wales' health before her announcement of cancer. Do you think the royals deserve an apology?
Lollipop lady lost. Hampshire councillors consulting on scrapping the traffic warden scheme because of budget cuts. But won't that put children in danger? Yes.
And Trump's hush money. The former president has another court hearing after being charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover up alleged affairs, as well as having to scrape together a small figure, $454 million in damages over his business dealings. Can Donald Trump pay those sorts of debts? Nearly £500 million.
Well, and you know what? It'll play to his strengths because people think it's all part of the conspiracy to try and stop him being on the ballot paper because the voters decide, not businesses and courts.
I wonder if people will just rally round, won't they? He is that well loved in America by some people and clearly despised by the rest. They will probably have a whip round and they'll get £500 million.
Population of 338 million. How many of those are Republicans? If they all put in a fiver, you'd soon be there.
Does it work like that? He's going to have donors, isn't he? You're right. There'll be some big, heavy hitters who will just pay off his debts. Oh, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. Let us know all of your thoughts this morning on all of our stories. First, the very latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Bev, thank you. The top stories this morning. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden says the government will stop at nothing to protect Britons from cyber attacks ahead of the expected announcement of fresh sanctions against China. The government set to sanction individuals believed to be involved in recent cyber attacks, which saw hackers access millions of voters' personal details. Several MPs and peers who've been critical of Beijing are thought to have also been targeted. It comes after a report found Britain is unprepared for a large-scale ransomware attack due to, quote, a lack of investment. Former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood, told GB News this has been a long time coming.
I'm pleased that the Deputy Prime Minister is going to finally hold China to account and to challenge this, because otherwise these behaviours become normalised. And it's worth stressing it's not just the UK that's being targeted in this way, but many countries across the West. So we do need to establish not just a resilience to be able to defend ourselves and protect ourselves and call this out, but also what are the international standards for us to be able to operate, given that the digital sphere is now becoming to dominate every aspect of our lives.
A £200 million package of investment aimed at securing the future of the country's nuclear industry will be unveiled today. Rishi Sunak will declare a critical national endeavour as he vows to strengthen the nuclear industry and boost jobs. He'll introduce a new fund backed by £20 million in public money to support growth in Barrow-in-Furness, the home of Britain's submarine programmes, and a further £180 million a year over the next decade, which Downing Street says would provide grants to local organisations and improvements to transport and health outcomes in the area. Minister for Energy Security and Net Zero Andrew Bowie told GB News it's a bonus for job creation in parts of the country where they're desperately needed.
The huge benefits of all of this investment in new technologies, including nuclear, is that we're going to be creating hundreds of thousands of new high-wage, high-skilled jobs the length and breadth of the country, many in places where high-wage jobs are actually at a premium. And that's why I'm so excited about the investment that we are making today in Sizewell C, in Hinkley Point C, and a 3rd gigawatt scale project coming down the line after that, and our small modular reactor programme. This is going to create a whole new range of energy technologies to support our transition to become more energy secure and independent.
Shadow Wales Secretary Joe Stevens says Labour welcomes the move.
It's the first duty of any government to protect the nation, and our support for the deterrent is total. You know, it's a cornerstone of national security. So we welcome, at long last, a defence nuclear strategy from the government. We've long argued for ministers to secure jobs in Barrow, for example, and across the submarine supply and into the nuclear sector.
Energy regulator Ofgem says it's to consider a new dynamic price cap based on the time of day households use their energy. It's launched a consultation on a range of options for the future of the price cap, including a more dynamic cap to encourage consumer flexibility. Other options include a targeted cap, which would be based on vulnerability, or capping the margin suppliers can make. Thousands of junior doctors in Wales are striking for 96 hours from today. It's the third time they've held strikes this year in their ongoing pay dispute. The industrial action will see appointments at hospitals and GPs postponed across the country. They're walking out until 7 o'clock on Friday morning. The British Medical Association's arguing for better pay, insisting doctors' salaries have dropped by almost a third in 15 years. Chilling levels of harassment are posing a serious threat to schools, according to an independent government advisor. A review led by Dame Sarah Khan will be published today, showing more than 75% of the public feel they can't speak their mind. It suggests many people feel society has become more divisive, and cites the case of a teacher who went into hiding after showing a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad during a class. It's understood the report will recommend a series of measures, including a ban on protests within 150 metres of schools. The Home Office is launching social media adverts to deter Vietnamese nationals from travelling to the UK illegally in small boats. The government says an increasing number of migrants coming via the channel are from Vietnam. New ads building on similar ones already used in Albania will be written in Vietnamese and set out risks of being exploited by smuggling gangs who profit from facilitating small boat crossings. And more than 14 million Easter getaway trips are expected over the weekend, causing travel disruption for many across the country. The RAC is warning that journeys on popular routes could take twice as long as usual as the bank holiday weekend leads into a 2-week school holiday. Trains will also be stopped as Network Rail carries out engineering works on the West Coast Main Line between Good Friday and Easter Monday. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Andrew and Beth.
Very good morning. It is 11:07. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Beth Turner. Before we move on, can we just thank you again for some absolute record viewing figures?
Yeah, we did, particularly on
that we
Thursday.
had last week.
It's a really interesting discussion. I mean, Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, is ordinarily not the most glamorous, exciting figure, but I think he really touched on something when he said, oi, this mental health thing's gone a bit too far.
Yeah.
We're blaming things for mental health, which just used to be part of daily life.
Yeah.
I had a lot of very interesting discussion about it, and I think people watching and listening really related to it.
Yeah, thank you for your support. We can't do this without you. Now, senior government figures are fearing today that Russia, China and Iran are fuelling a lot of these wild conspiracies and theories about the Princess of Wales' health, and they're doing it to destabilise the nation.
So, as you know, it's been a difficult couple of weeks for the royal family, from speculation about the photoshopped portraits to Kate announcing she has cancer. So do we owe them an apology? Joining us now is the royal biographer Ingrid Seward. Ingrid, morning to you. First time we've spoken to you since Kate's very moving and I thought very powerful statement to camera on Friday. Do we owe an apology? Was there too much of a clamour for more information?
There was too much of a clamour, but that is human nature. And I don't think that either William or Kate would like an apology, because it just focuses even more attention on them. And I mean, the monarchy is, as Prince Philip very wisely used to say, it's not about individuals, it's about the institution. And I think what has happened in this modern world, which is completely understandable, is it's just been very much focused on the individuals, and poor Kate has really come in as the person that everybody's focused on. I think she would be very embarrassed by an apology. And I think what she really wants is for everything to just calm down and be left alone, which is completely understandable.
It all sort of made sense, actually, Ingrid, in retrospect, didn't it? The various timings, particularly wanting to communicate the news of her illness to her 3 young children. That was clearly at the forefront of all the decisions that she was making.
Well, also, she needed to recover enough to start her, as she told us, she was starting some chemotherapy treatment. But I mean, I understand we all know people that have had cancer, and we all know people whose children have had to be told. I understand that is the most difficult thing because, of course, children are really frightened and they don't understand it. Why would they? And I think they were, and also they were worried, they said, about what was going to be said at school. And, at school, however wonderful the school is, other children can be very cruel.
Yeah. And so telling them on the eve, what she wanted to do was tell them on the eve of the children breaking up for the Easter holidays so that she could then shield them from playground gossip. They can hang out with grandma at home and do all the Easter egg hunts and all of those normal things at this time of the year. She really is, I think, above all else, she's a remarkable mother, especially within that family that can be quite dysfunctional when it comes to parenting over the years.
Yes, they certainly can be dysfunctional. But I think the one thing that the Queen really, really was happy about when when William and Kate first, became engaged, was that Kate came from such a stable family background. Very, Sophie had come from a stable family background, but Fergie certainly hadn't. And of course, poor Diana certainly hadn't. And I think the Queen is a great believer in the stability in early life for children, which of course is one of the things that Kate is concentrating on now, the early years.
And it's interesting because, of course, William and Kate's married strong and healthy. Sophie and Prince Edward, he gave an interview very recently and it was very charming about, that's still a great love job. And of course, we've seen in other parts of the royal family, Ingrid, where they've not had such a stable upbringing, disastrous marriages.
Well, absolutely. Diana and Charles were obviously a mismatch, although Diana said later in her life that she wished that she'd met Charles at a different period in her life because they could have conquered the world together. I don't think they would have done for one moment, but that was her fantasy idea. And she was very anxious that their children, i.e. William and Harry, should know that she and Charles had been very much in love once. She was really, really distressed by the fact that people said that, they never loved each other.
It's, I think, one of the things that I've kind of reflected on a bit in the last few weeks as well is quite how sidelined Meghan and Harry now are when it comes to the royal stories. Yeah. I think they've issued a small statement, haven't they, Ingrid? But they're very much... they're in the shadow of this much more important issue.
Well, the interesting thing was that they didn't find out about Kate's illness until we all found out about it, which means there is absolutely no communication there. And then they sent a message, whether they called or not. I'm sure Meghan got off straight on the phone because that's very Meghan, but whether or not the call was taken, I don't know. I'd love to know. But I should think Kate was probably polite enough to take any calls. But I just cannot see a friendship re-cementing at this moment. They've got so many other things to think about. A lot of people think that illness brings people together, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, and I think actually... Ingrid, the fact that they did find out from TV or radio the way the rest of us did, I think it's because William and Kate simply can't trust Harry and Meghan because other stuff they've been told ends up on an American TV chat show or in his book or in a podcast or in a Netflix documentary.
Well, I think also, sadly, obviously, that I don't feel that the King and Queen can't really trust Harry and Meghan either. I think the whole royal family just want to keep them, at a distance, which of course they are at the moment. But Harry is coming over here in May, I believe, to do something with Invictus. So I think we will see him. I don't know if we'll see Meghan. Certainly going to see Harry. So the story will go on.
OK. All right. Thank you, Ingrid. Ingrid Stewart there. And of course, Catherine, or the King still across the front pages of every single newspaper.
Worldwide, this has been the most extraordinary story. Apparently, American TV news bulletins were broken into. You know, to have the princess's statement. It was a masterstroke for her to do it herself, to camera herself. She wrote it herself.
And you know what? It also reminds me, Story, how clever GB News viewers and listeners are, because you lot out there were going on in our inbox all last week saying, stop talking about her, stop talking about her, move on, move on. Just let the poor girl get well in peace, and you should feel quite vindicated.
Going back to Meghan and Harry, though, last week it was announced that they'd been downgraded on the Buckingham Palace website. It is not a coincidence. It is not a coincidence, because the Princess of Wales filmed that video on Wednesday, and that announcement about them being downgraded was on Thursday, so it all happened at the same time. They would just make it absolutely clear in case people think, oh, Harry and Meghan can come back. No, it's not happening. There's no chance of it happening, because they are not working members of the royal family anymore. They've made their decision, and that's it.
Yeah, we're moving on. And we are too. Because lollipop ladies in Hampshire are facing the axe. Lollipop men.
For that.
So I feel quite strongly about this. Are the councils making a big mistake? Who is going to teach our children how to cross the road? From what I can see, parents aren't doing it. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Tubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
You think this country needs new gas power stations? Apparently, this will all be about trying to get some form of energy security. Rishi Sunak has upset people today with this suggestion, people saying that actually this would do more damage to climate change than it would do good. Where are you on it, Richard?
I'll tell you exactly where. We need a lot more gas power stations and nuclear power stations, because quite often the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. Last week, we imported 16% of all our electricity because we haven't got enough capacity in the UK, and we're now totally over-reliant on renewables.
The part of the problem is the lack of storage capacity, which the government has finally got round to addressing. I think this as backup is actually quite a sensible idea. But they are not doing anything, as far as I can tell. At the moment, it will be retrofitted to have storage capability, which seems to be utterly bonkers. I mean, anyone who's got solar panels, you know very well you're storing up energy. So it's about storage as much as production. They could have gone, 20 years ago, we could have had nuclear power. We could have done more. We haven't looked far enough ahead in the future, and we are in grave danger of making the same mistake. I mean, the other side of this is, what is the difference going to be? Blackouts are, they're irritating and...
Irritating? It'd be disastrous. It would literally destroy our economy.
Well, they would be now, but, some of us remember 3-day weeks and things like that. And in fact, I grew up thinking that everybody had, at least a couple of days a week when they had to eat off a primer stove and things.
This is, again, I don't want to harp on, but this is one of the problems in the politics in our country, isn't it? So many politicians, they just think in election cycles. Absolutely. They just think, what can I do and say to get my own backside re-elected at the next general election? They're not always looking ahead. Actually, politics aside, what is genuinely the best thing for this country?
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Tubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:18, Andrew Pearce. Stop talking to Emma Wolf about who's the most charismatic politician.
Well, we were talking about how uncharismatic.
Very harsh.
No, it's not harsh. It's true. He's not charismatic, Matthew Large. I know you're a Labour supporter and always want to.
Yeah, he's not Bill Clinton, but he's real and genuine and.
And is he dull?
He's not. I wouldn't say he's dull.
What
no.
would you say then?
I would say he's a serious person who wants to seriously change the country.
Right.
Yeah, but we do it with a sense of humour.
I just was saying that I was underwhelmed. I was all ready for that thing. I met him and I thought, he's going to be one of those people that when you actually meet them, they've got something special, there's magic, and I was very underwhelmed with Keir Starmer.
And you remember, Matthew, if Tony Blair walked in a room, he used charisma.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not necessarily a good thing, though.
No, that can... I mean, sometimes you can have a bit too much charisma, as Boris found out to his cost. But to be serious, I think that one of the things Keir needs to do in the 6 months before the election, unless we suddenly sprung for June, is get across more that when you chat to him one-on-one and he's much more relaxed and that personality comes across. So I know one thing they're looking at is how he does interviews outside of the traditional political...
You can't teach that. You can't...
Exactly.
No, I mean, you don't need to teach that, because when you chat to him, when you have time with him one-on-one, he is... and he talks about himself,
no,
he does relax.
No, I've talked to him one-to-one, he's still boring. I'm afraid he's...
I don't want to hear
Nobody's as interesting as you, Andy, that's why.
But I can remember when John Major was up against it in '97, his people saying, if only we could get the Prime Minister to talk to people one-to-one, it would transform everything. I said, what, on a population of 50 million, he's going to have a lot...
No, it's more about him relaxing in interviews and doing interviews where he gets to talk about himself and why he's in politics rather than just the traditional, policy interviews. So I think
Matthew,
you might be seeing
I would love leaders to stop talking about themselves. I don't care where they... I don't care about...
You don't want to know how he stacks the dishwasher?
Yes, I know. We've heard that story a million times. I'll get in trouble with my wife for that. Oh, ho, ho, ho.
Oh, yeah, quite. Right, so what do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about farmers or lollipop ladies?
Lollipop ladies.
Should we do the lollipop
ladies?
So,
outrage.
Absolutely.
What's the story?
Britain's lollipop ladies are under threat by new rounds of council cuts. In particular, there is uproar in the New Forest across Hampshire, as Hampshire tries to save £1.1 million by getting rid of at least 21 lollipop ladies and men.
What a counterproductive economy that would be.
Yeah, absolutely. But I tell you what it says. I mean, I'm obviously going to say this is a sign of how Tories have hollowed out local government. And, one of the things they've done is to try and preserve the spending that they're responsible for in Whitehall. They have made life very tough for local government. I think in the early days there was some fat that could be cut. I would agree with that in the early days of the 2010 of the Cameron government. But now we're right down to the bone. And I think one thing Labour should capitalise on here is lollipop ladies are an absolute classic example of the benefits of the public realm. Of actually, it's written on our Labour cards that we work better together when we come together, when there are, there's collective provision. And lollipop ladies are a classic example. As you say, it's a false economy.
Can I tell you a lollipop lady story?
Absolutely.
And I didn't know we were covering this, and I've never really chatted. We have a lollipop lady near us, and so we cycled through with my 3-year-old on the back, and we talked to her, and she is lovely.
Yeah.
We were chatting to her today, and it's part of the community.
Absolutely.
It's not about what she's actually doing. She's not that great at road traffic management when there's cars and buses coming through Shoreditch every...
Yeah, in London it's pretty unforgiving.
Do you know what? Her shift is basically half an hour outside the school in the morning and half an hour outside her school in the afternoon. It's not a lot. She makes almost nothing, so it's such a false economy, as you say. It's such a small part of their budget. They get almost... Do you imagine how long their shift is? It's only at the beginning and end of school.
And she's almost probably not doing it so much for the money, it's because she enjoys it.
It probably takes her more money to get that, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Stands outside the
and it's
school
about the social fabric disappearing.
It is, and looking at the figures of this, so 2021, and of course the lockdown years, there were less road traffic accidents because children weren't going out in the same way. But 512 children aged 7 and under killed or seriously injured. It's a whole class of children in this country are killed every 19 days by getting hit by cars. And we just don't prioritise the education of this
There used to be ads on TV called the Green Cross Code.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When did you last see an ad like that?
Exactly.
The Tufty Club.
We don't bother with that kind of thing anymore, do we?
We don't bother.
No.
To protect, because kids don't cross the road properly because they're always glued.
But also outside schools these days, and any kind of colleges, you've got parents just dumping the car, running out. I mean, there's a lot of chaos outside schools
But there's an
because of the drop-off.
dereliction of parenting duty everywhere I look at the moment, Emma. Like your little one, you will be the person to teach them how to cross the road, won't you?
Exactly.
You will never miss a teaching point. Every single time you stand with a child at the side of the road.
And you say the things that you remember your parents saying, we cross on the green man, we wait while it's red, all of that kind of thing. But it's similar with brushing their teeth, all of the safety things that you just, know, showing them how to put the socks and shoes on, the things that you just need to do, put the work in.
But so few people are doing that. I mean, you will see, you know, you stand at the crossing and you'll see a mum holding the hand of a toddler and she's looking at her dad, looking at the phone, and then it's red man and she goes, oh, there's nothing coming. Oh, come on, we'll just go quickly across. And every time I see it, it makes me want to...
Yeah, our parents wouldn't have...
Who else is teaching your child to cross the road?
Yeah.
You see it all the time. Save the Children, actually, the charity, they are calling, and I think this is really interesting, for a minister for children, because it's remarkable that there isn't such a thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, we had one under Labour.
There isn't one.
Because we made what actually Gordon Brown did is we had children's schools. They split the education department, so the further and higher were in one, and children's schools were in one, and there was a children's minister within that department.
Because then
Ed Balls was in charge.
And then every single decision should then factor in the needs of children, be that highways, be that health, crime, everything.
Because we've got an equality minister who takes in all the diversity issues.
Exactly.
But we don't have a children's.
But even things like
both are valuable.
Someone telling the government, talking to parents and to people about not putting your child in front of a screen all day long, or not giving them fizzy pop on the way to school. Just really basic things that maybe people don't understand they don't understand.
But also people got, I mean, a whole generation of kids during lockdown where you know, when you would normally at whatever age you kind of get aware of it, they weren't aware because there were no cars. You know, you could, you know, I can't ride a bike. This is another confession. So I was given a bike riding lesson because I had divorced parents in the 80s, so I had a go-kart because I was spoiled and everybody else had a bike. But I had a go-kart because, like, I had a Commodore 64 and not a Spectrum. If you had divorced parents, you did well.
Wow. What bribery presents?
You not ride a bike now?
So I was given one lesson by my mate on
Matthew, I'll give you
Emma's going to teach me. We're not having the cameras there. But the point I was making was...
have one with a stand. Do you remember the ones with the stand?
Stabilisers.
Stabilisers.
Yeah, so
my point was, do you know which road that I was taught on in lockdown? On the Mall, on the Mall, as everyone was saying. Because there was no traffic. So that was my point. I've now written very far too much.
You live very close to Buckingham Palace?
Not far away, yes. My very small flat.
Matthew, over Easter, I will come and teach you and my 3-year-old how to ride a bike.
And I bet he was a lot better than me.
Can we talk about how generous the British people are?
I love this.
Matthew, this is £14 billion that we've given a record amount to good cause.
Yeah, Emma's across the facts on
this
one.
Go on, Emma.
Yeah, no, I think this is a beautiful story. It's about the fact that, you know, some of the most deprived areas even are still giving to charity despite the pandemic, despite the poverty the country's going through and the inflation and the cost of everything, cost of living crisis. Brits are still incredibly generous and are still giving. And I think this is a really, really good story. And when we have all this nonsense about giving, £1 billion back in reparations to flagellate ourselves for the sins of the past and all of that, actually, what we're doing now is doing a lot of good, and this is people putting their hands in their pockets.
We are good,
£14 billion in
14 billion pounds.
Absolutely.
And people are volunteering.
And especially at a time of cost of living crisis as well, when people's family budgets have been really squeezed. So, good on the British people.
One of the most deprived areas, Belfast West, is giving loads. People are volunteering, they're donating, they're sponsoring people. Brits are generous.
And I think volunteering is absolutely key because, basically the country is dependent on volunteers in so many ways. And you remember Cameron and his Big Society, which, although actually was mocked at the time, there was some, because it was at the time of austerity as well, so the two got conflicted.
I was rather irritated when he launched that thing called Big Society, which disappeared after 3 days, because I thought, don't you understand? We're already doing it.
Exactly. It should be about celebrating what you already had rather than saying you want to set up something new.
Because the WI has been a staple of society.
But actually, I think the Lollipop Ladies are more part of this thing. It's about social fabric.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that, in terms of politics, I think that's something that, especially that Labour can capitalise on. The public realm, things like libraries that have closed. It's just the kind of core of what you expect locally.
You know what I do?
We should talk to defend.
I couldn't agree more. What I do object to is, though, when you get to pay your bill at the end of a shop and it says, do you want to give 25p to
Very strange. You can pay, so £1.12, and it'll say, do you want to top it up to £2? Do you want to give 80 pence on a bit,
And if you're in a hurry and you press the wrong button.
Absolutely no. And where is it going to? I do not want Tesco or Sainsbury's or any of the other big shops asking me if they want to, really.
But that's because the companies are fulfilling their ESG agenda. It's their environmental social governance. So at the end of the month, they can go, look how much we raised for charity. You didn't actually do anything. We just took a bit more money off our customers.
I can never, when I see somebody rattling the tin for the Royal British Legion, every time.
You get your...
Every time.
A note,
that's your choice, and you put your money in your pocket, and if you have cash, it's a great way to
and also,
do it.
Because of gift aid, it's good to, sometimes it's more tax efficient for the charity because they get the money back if you do it online.
Or if you write a cheque.
If you've not seen, there was a story last week that there's a big charity cheque for people. The BBC, do their charity appeal every week, and people are sending in cheques, and the police have had to step in because the cheques are being targeted.
Do you know what I found odd last week?
Yeah. Being stolen, yeah.
Last week or the week before, it was Comic Relief Day. I saw one kid in the street with a red nose on, and I thought, is it Comic Relief Day? That used to be a huge deal.
Lenny Henry's giving it up. So don't write your cheque, Andrew. It's not secure. Get on your online banking. We'll make a modern man of you yet.
My chequebook. I'm very...
You're funny with chequebooks. You were the only one who could shop the other week when there was that massive cyber attack.
I wasn't, because I always carry cash too.
And then he comes off air and he sends a fax.
I know what you're going to
Don't tell everybody you carry cash. You'll become a target.
Well, probably. And because Matthew never carries cash in case he has to go to the bar.
Exactly.
Well, now, of course, at the bar, you pay on your card and it asks you if you want to leave a tip.
Which is also very irritating, because you get a pint and they say, do you want to give them a pound? No.
I've just served myself.
Job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's your job.
I think because we've got the minimum wage here, it's less of a pressure. Like, obviously, in America, everybody has to tip in the bar because they basically don't get paid.
I can remember being in a restaurant in Tel Aviv and being chased down the street by a waitress saying you didn't leave a tip. I said, that's
outrageous.
Well, I hope not with a meat cleaver. I've got this image.
I remember being a waitress in New York City, and the amount you'd make in tips. I mean, we were paid absolute rubbish, but you would go home with hundreds of dollars of tips.
Yeah.
Really good.
Right, thank you both. We didn't get onto the trans darts player, which is a little disappointing, but we can save that for another day.
It's Andrew in his chequebook.
Matthew, Emma, thank you so much. So, as Donald Trump returns to the courthouse, this time on hush money charges, will his legal battles impact his re-election race? That and much more after the morning's news.
It'll help.
Thank you. The top stories this morning. The Prime Minister says the UK has world-leading defences when it comes to cyber attacks ahead of the expected announcement of fresh sanctions against China. Deputy Prime Minister Oliver Dowden, meanwhile, is due to address Parliament later over the threats, insisting the government will stop at nothing to protect the British public. The government set to sanction individuals believed to be involved in recent attacks, which saw hackers access millions of voters' personal details. Several MPs and peers who've been critical of Beijing are also thought to have been targeted. It comes after a report found Britain is unprepared for a large-scale ransomware attack due to, quote, a lack of investment. A £200 million package of investment aimed at securing the future of the country's nuclear industry has been unveiled. Rishi Sunak has declared a critical national endeavour as he vows to strengthen the nuclear industry and boost jobs. He's introduced a new fund backed by £20 million in public money to support growth in Barrow-in-Furness, that's the home of Britain's submarine programmes, and a further £180 million a year over the next decade, which Downing Street says will provide grants to local organisations. The Labour leader is promising to take back control of our national energy security as he pledges investment for homegrown power generation. Sir Keir Starmer's pledging an £8.3 billion boost as part of efforts to get President Putin's, quote, boot off our throat. It'll create thousands of jobs and cut bills for families. Energy regulator Ofgem says it's to consider a new dynamic price cap based on the time of day households use their energy. It's launched a consultation on a range of options for the future of the price cap, including a more dynamic cap to encourage consumer flexibility. Other options include a targeted cap, which could be based on vulnerability, or capping the margin suppliers can make. More than 14 million journeys for Easter getaways are expected over the weekend, causing travel disruption for many across the country. The RAC is warning that journeys on popular routes could take twice as long as usual, as the bank holiday weekend leads into a 2-week school holiday. Trains will also be stopped as Network Rail carries out engineering works on the West Coast Main Line between Good Friday and Easter Monday. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2627 and €1.1670. The price of gold is £1,720 and 1 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,901 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good morning still. Up at noon. Good afternoon, Britain, with Emily and Tom. They are here to tell us what's going on the show today, guys.
Looking colour-coordinated.
We are looking particularly lovely
We send
today.
WhatsApps to each other every night just to check we don't actually. We should.
We absolutely do not. Yes, you're going to want to stay tuned for 12 o'clock because we're going to be hearing live from Dame Sarah Khan, who of course is advising the government on all this extremism stuff. She says that democracy is under attack. And she's cited, of course, the teacher who is in hiding in Batley, still suffering from PTSD, no support from local agencies.
This is the one who used a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad in the classroom.
Exactly.
But there's
Still
more than that
in
her
hiding.
report. She also cites an imam, a liberal imam, who's needed police protection.
That's right.
Because she was against the burqa and very repressive things like that. And so there's been this chilling atmosphere and perhaps a flourishing of extremism in certain corners of Britain. But she'll be speaking live to us on GB News at 12 o'clock.
Very good. And what is she doing about schools, Tom? Just remind me, she's going to create what she calls buffer zones outside schools. So what, no demonstrations outside schools?
150 metres outside of schools, that's what she wants.
That is so ridiculous.
But I don't know if it is ridiculous, because if you look at what's been happening, we've had pro-Palestine protests get quite aggressive outside primary schools. We've had, of course, the protests outside that school in Batley, where this teacher went into hiding. This is actually a problem, but yes, there is the question of freedom to protest, freedom of expression. She also wants an office for social cohesion. What would that actually do? Can you have an office for social cohesion? Can you force social cohesion? No. But you've got to come down hard on extremists, so that's what she wants.
Well, yes and no. But I just...
Again, definition.
What is an extremist? Define your extremist, and an extremist under a Conservative government may be very different to an extremist under a Labour government.
True.
What you wish for.
Or indeed under an SNP government, because later in the 12 o'clock hour, we'll be speaking to Murdo Fraser MSP. Now, he's the former deputy leader of the Scottish Tories, a member of the Scottish Parliament, and he's been lodged as committing a hate incident with Police Scotland because of a tweet that he sent about non-binary people. Now, we're going to be speaking...
Exhibit A.
We're going to be speaking to Murdo Fraser at 12:20 because he is now suing Police Scotland because they've held this data on him, they didn't tell him, and apparently you can have a hate incident lodged against you without any recourse from yourself. Anyone can say, this person's hateful, therefore that's on their file.
The SNP have become really extreme.
Well, they've got hate crime laws coming in on April Fool's Day, so we'll talk to him about that too. What is it like in Scotland when it comes to free speech at the moment?
Well, it's going to come here as well if we're not careful, if we don't push back on these things. And the idea that you protest 150 metres from the school, they'll just do it 150 metres from the school. It's not going to stop the protest.
But
it probably means the teachers can't keep an eye on what's happening. But kids will be harangued, but it'll be 150 metres down the road and the teachers won't be able to get involved and they won't know who's doing it and it will be chaos.
That's a very good point. Perhaps we can put that to Sarah.
Put them to Sarah. Yeah, right, great. Lots to look forward to there. That's from midday. For now, though, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We're not quite finished with you.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is the brand of toothpaste super important here, or is it more about the toothbrush? Because I was told a long time ago by my dentist, electric toothbrush, Pip, that is the way to go.
You're exactly right. I mean, the action of mechanically removing plaque, so using a brush, is much more effective than the brand of toothpaste itself. But in terms of the ingredient in toothpaste that we're looking for, it's something called fluoride. And fluoride is essential to help remineralize and strengthen our teeth. It's really important to use a toothpaste with fluoride. And in terms of brushing, using an electric toothbrush is just much easier. You know, you're brushing your teeth first thing in the morning, last thing at night. You're going to be a bit tired in those times. So using an electric toothbrush, you just hold it against your tooth and gum and it does all the work for you. So it's just much easier in my opinion.
But you have to use your electric toothbrush properly.
You're exactly right. Yeah, there is a technique of actually brushing your teeth, although it sounds really simple. With an electric toothbrush, you have to hold it against the tooth and the gum. Ideally, you want a pressure sensor in that toothbrush so you know exactly when you're pressing too hard. But if you're using a manual toothbrush, you need to move it around and small circular motions. But actually, what I see is people who use manual toothbrushes, they tend to over scrub and over brush, which can actually lead to gum recession and your enamel thinning long term.
Sometimes I will get up in the morning and I will have breakfast and then I'll brush my teeth. Is that wrong?
Unfortunately, that's wrong. So the best time to brush your teeth is first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up. If you're brushing after you eat and after breakfast, you're brushing your teeth in that weakened acidic state. So your teeth are actually under attack and they're much more vulnerable.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
First.
Very good morning. We want to hear what you've been saying at home. We're going to have a quick look at it here. Lots of you talking about the lollipop ladies. We're going to be bringing you a little video about that in a moment.
John says if every parent put 5p in each week in the average size school, that would pay for the lollipop lady or man.
That's right. And somebody made a really interesting point here, I've just lost it now, about how much it costs.
For a fatal accident?
Yes, if you got it there.
Yeah, £1.5 million.
That's what it costs if there's a fatal accident. Of course, there'd be all the investigations, etc.
Yeah.
So
insurance, damage,
I don't understand it.
compensation.
And so many of you in support of the farmers protesting in Westminster today. Angela, morning Angela, says forcing farmers to grow wildflowers, presumably to encourage insects. Does the government not realise if they're producing wheat, barley and rapeseed oil, they must already be supporting a massive population of pollinators? Jeff, I support the farmers 100%. I'd pay more for food produced in this country. We should subsidise them rather than renewables. If the government came and said we're going to take a quid out of all your tax and we're going to give it to the farmers, we would all be on board with that, wouldn't we?
Yeah, but it's this mad dash to net zero.
It is.
That's what it's all about. And the Welsh government have had huge problems on it, and now it's happening in Britain too. Ronald says government wants farmers to grow flowers and for us to get our food from other countries. Can you see a problem here? I can. Self-sufficiency is the way forward. We must not rely on others for the basics we need. But also, if you can, buy British, buy English, Welsh, Scottish.
Michael says, I'm with the farmers in this protest. Why can't our farmers just plant their seeds, ignore the ignorant, condescending MPs in Parliament and grow food? I did ask that, Michael, didn't I, of our farmer? He said, I'm sure the population of the UK will support the farmers when they realise that we will starve without them being able to do their jobs. And, of course, our farmer said, if I ignore the government edicts, I will go bankrupt.
They get the subsidies from the government to bribe them. It's a bribe.
And then what? I want to say to the MPs...
What are they going to do with all the wildflowers?
What, when we've got no food?
I know.
Do we just accept Bill Gates' factory-made meat out of some awful, unnatural produce? No, I don't want that.
And are we going to end up buying Chinese food?
I mean, I like Chinese food, don't get me wrong. I had Chinese food over the weekend, but that's not quite what not what we mean, not talking about chow mein.
No. Now, it's coming up. We've been talking to you about lollipop ladies, because Hampshire County Council is considering getting rid of all 21 lollipop men and women to save over £1 million.
Well, parents have warned that the cost-cutting measures could endanger the lives of their children. They're right. GB News' South West of England reporter Jeff Moody has the full report.
Sharon Woodford has been guiding children across this street in Holbury in Hampshire for 32 years.
She's phenomenal. She's phenomenal. She knows every single child by their name. So it doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter how old they are or anything. Yeah, she's been amazing.
I don't know how I remember their names, but I do.
You must really care.
Yes, I do.
and it'd be a shame to see it go, but what do? You know.
Sharon's been told she may be losing her job, as the council says the road's not busy enough to warrant her salary. And she's not alone. 21 lollipop men and women in Hampshire are facing the chop in cost-cutting measures that may mean the end of school crossing patrols altogether. Parents are angry.
I think it's ridiculous. She's here every day, twice a day, getting us across this road safely. It's the main road to going through this area. A lot of the kids that go to that school, they walk on their own from that direction, so they're on their own. So I just think that with all the money flying around in the world at the moment, the least they could do is afford to fund this wonderful person and get us across the road.
Like many councils, Hampshire County Council says it's running out of cash. They say they have a hole in their budget to the tune of £132 million. After coming for 21 lollipop men and women, the remaining 163 school crossing patrols could be removed as well. In a statement, Hampshire County Council said, whilst we have a legal duty to promote road safety and take measures to prevent accidents, there is no specific legal requirement for us to provide school crossing patrols, of which there are currently 184 in Hampshire. We know that local communities value their school crossing patrol officers, and this is not a reflection on individuals undertaking that role. But there may be effective alternatives for some sites, such as installing permanent safety measures or improvements to make a crossing point safer. But locals say these cuts put their children's lives at risk.
I think it's stupid because this road can be very fast, and like a load of the kids just come flying across. And she's there. She's like the safety hub of the road.
Hampshire County Council says 13 services are facing cuts, from household waste recycling centres to bus services. Parents in Holbury have got together a petition to try and save Sharon Woodford's job. The council says it hasn't made any firm decisions yet and will only remove the service if a crossing can be made safe. Lollipop men and women have been a mainstay outside our schools for 7 decades. For many, they're as British as fish and chips. But if councils can't balance their books, these stalwarts at our school gates may become a thing of the past. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Outrageous.
So to save £1 million in a annual budget of £2.5 billion, it's ridiculous. There must be other ways, county councils, and if they don't get, it's about community.
It is. And safety. We're constantly being sold things under the idea that it's going to keep us safe. That is something tangibly keeping those children safe, and those parents can relax knowing that the children can cross the road safely.
I'll lay money they'll abandon this plan.
Well, let's hope so.
There will be an outcry.
If you are watching from Hampshire County Council,
give us a call.
Come and have a chat with us tomorrow.
Why don't we see if we can get one? We'll try and get somebody on tomorrow to talk about it.
If they can really defend this, if they can stand this up, then if you can do give us a call and we will get in touch with you as well and we can get you on the show. That would be lovely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right, now Donald Trump is facing another court hearing. He's got to find $454 million that he owes for damages. Could this sink his White House re-election bid? We'll find out in just a moment with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. More wet weather to come throughout this week, really. Not too much today across parts of East Anglia and the southeast, but it is a pretty chilly start to the working week. Low pressure sitting just to the west of the UK, as it will be for the next several days. Weather fronts pushing northwards. Far northwest of Scotland, seeing some bright or even sunny spells. And as I mentioned, much of East Anglia and the southeast dry, but everywhere it's drab, it's damp, and it's fairly breezy as well. Some heavy bursts of rain across the southwest, and the wet weather turning to snow over the hills across eastern Scotland. Temperatures here really struggling, 6-7 degrees at best. Further south we might get to double digits, maybe 11 or 12 with a bit of brightness in the southeast, but still fairly chilly for the time of year. And it's going to be really cold rain in eastern Scotland this evening. We'll see more snow over the hills. That could cause some problems on the highest routes. The A9, for example, seeing some heavy snow for a time through the night. Elsewhere, the rain will tend to ease across a good chunk of England and Wales. Temperatures will fall down to single figures. But generally, a dry start for many on Tuesday. Still pretty cloudy, and there is more rain to come, more snow to come for eastern Scotland, with chiefly rain at lower levels. But this zone of wet weather then works back across parts of the Midlands into Wales and across southeast England, so a much wetter day here. Something a bit brighter for South Wales and southwest England, but still, although we may get to double digits, most of us on the chilly side.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Well, it's time nearly up for Trump. Haven't we heard that before? The former US president has just a few hours left to pay almost $500 million penalty from his latest fraud case.
That's right. Otherwise, authorities in New York could freeze his bank accounts and begin moving in on his properties.
Well, joining us in the studio is US political journalist Laurie Laird. Laurie, I can't. He's going to do this right to the 11th hour, isn't he? He's going to milk it for all it's worth. The drama.
I suspect he will probably pull something together, although the feeling is that this is Donald Trump's worst nightmare, to be seen as not as rich as he's told us he is, right? He's a businessman, and a lot of Americans believe that, despite the fact he's had a checkered history in his property investment. But the feeling is for him to present as not this unbelievably wealthy man is really getting at his ego.
Just remind us why he has to pay this bill, Laurie.
He has been found guilty of fraud, of inflating the value of his properties for various reasons, to put them up as collateral against loans. And some of these lies were egregious. He added a couple of floors to one of his office buildings. He tripled the square footage of one of his residences. I mean, it's a really egregious.
There's no debate about it. He did it.
No, I mean, this is like you putting your house on the market and saying 2,500 square feet. No, I mean 5,000 square feet. I mean, it's that egregious.
And of course, the Mar-a-Lago, the famous one that he said is valued at about $1 billion. Correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it? And didn't he say it was $1 billion or something?
But there's no market for this thing, so you can. And this is what he has relied upon because these are not liquid assets. Put whatever value
figure you want. It's only worth what someone will pay for it.
Exactly that.
So the court have said, well, you might think your house is worth $1 billion, but actually we've seen the interior design and we think you'd be lucky to get $200 million.
Don't even start on the interior design on this stuff, right?
Yeah.
But he is right about this. And the other thing that he is right about is if the Attorney General starts to seize property, this isn't stuff that you can liquidate easily to raise cash for this bond. Again, these are one-off properties. Now, Letitia James, who is the Attorney General of New York, has started to do things.
Who hates him?
Well, publicly they have exchanged words. She doesn't particularly like him. And she's made a couple of mistakes saying, I'm eyeing one of your office buildings, which is right across the street from her office. It's coming down to his level, isn't it? But she has put things in play to begin seizing properties in New York State, but that goes to another court. This is a complicated process.
Does he have enough support from big hitters to give him this money to get him off the hook?
That's the big question. And we found out last week that he is going to float his media company on the New York Stock Exchange, possibly as early as this week. Now, has he pledged those shares as collateral to some unidentified donor? I suspect he's going to be able to scrounge this together. But again, has his reputation been damaged?
I was going to say, is it damaging him?
I suspect something is going on. We had a really interesting thing over the weekend. Give me a little latitude. This is a little pointy-headed. But the ex-head of the Republican National Committee, a woman called Ronna McDaniel, had long been a Trump supporter. She was sort of edged out in favor of people who are close to Trump, including his daughter-in-law. She did the round on the Sundays yesterday and said, I don't believe the election was stolen in 2020. I took one for the team when I said that it was stolen. That's a direct quote. So she is now criticizing Trump. We have another high-profile Republican senator, a woman called Lisa Murkowski, who said, I might leave the party. So we are seeing a little bit of rumbling of discontent. Now, whether that comes down to the electorate is an open question.
And this will be the year to find out. But Laurie, thank you so much. Laurie Laird there now. That is it from us in Britain's Newsroom for today.
Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. We're going to see you tomorrow. See you then.
Yes, coming up, is extremism a threat to democracy? We'll be hearing from Dame Sarah Khan herself, who's issued a review and 15 recommendations to the government over extremism.
We'll also speak to the Tory MSP, who's now threatening to sue Police Scotland after they logged one of his tweets as a hate incident. We'll get the inside story.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. More wet weather to come throughout this week, really. Not too much today across parts of East Anglia and the southeast, but it is a pretty chilly start to the working week. Low pressure sitting just to the west of the UK, as it will be for the next several days. Weather fronts pushing northwards. Far northwest of Scotland, seeing some bright or even sunny spells. And as I mentioned, much of East Anglia and the southeast dry, but everywhere it's drab, it's damp, and it's fairly breezy as well. Some heavy bursts of rain across the southwest, and the wet weather turning to snow over the hills across eastern Scotland. Temperatures here really struggling, 6-7 degrees at best. Further south we might get to double digits, maybe 11 or 12 with a bit of brightness in the southeast, but still fairly chilly for the time of year. And it's going to be really cold rain in eastern Scotland this evening. We'll see more snow over the hills. That could cause some problems on the highest routes. The A9, for example, seeing some heavy snow for a time through the night. Elsewhere, the rain will tend to ease across a good chunk of England and Wales. Temperatures will fall down to single figures, but generally a dry start for many on Tuesday. Still pretty cloudy, and there is more rain to come, more snow to come for eastern Scotland, with chiefly rain at lower levels, but this zone of wet weather then works back across parts of the Midlands into Wales and across southeast England, so a much wetter day here. Something a bit brighter for South Wales and southwest England, but still, although we may get to double digits, most of us on the chilly side.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner just like Phil?
Obviously, whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
Enter our massive spring giveaway. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats, and £12,345 in tax-free cash, cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 25th of March.
Britain is struggling to cope with extremism. That's according to a damning new report which says the challenge is leading to an insidious erosion of democracy. We'll speak to the government's independent counter-extremism advisor, Dame Sarah Khan.
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
Of going green under Labour. Experts now say the party's Carbon Zero 2030 plan will cost a whopping £116 billion. Is Labour's energy goal realistic or just out of tune?
Ed Miliband there. And a senior Scottish parliamentarian is today threatening legal action against Police Scotland after they logged one of his tweets as a hate incident. We speak to the MSP at the centre of a free speech storm.
And live pictures here of New York, where the clock is ticking for Donald Trump to stump up almost $500 million in legal costs.
Now, I'm very interested to hear from Dame Sarah Khan. So she's written this report, this review into social cohesion, into extremism. She has 15 recommendations. Now, one of them we want to get your view on is her suggestion that there should be a 150-metre buffer zone for protests outside schools. Now, she's asking for this because if you cast your mind back to Batley Grammar School, where there were a huge number of protests, quite aggressive and intimidating, outside that school because the teacher there had shown a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad in a classroom.
And then, of course, he went into hiding
Still
as a
is in
result
hiding.
of all of this. The question is, how best do you deal with this extremism threat? Is the suggestion of an exclusion zone, a buffer zone banning protest, the best way to do that? We'll be speaking live to Dame Sarah Khan herself in just